Fellas.
I think Derek's dead.
Wait, what?
I don't
Welcome to the
Good start,
Hivemind
good start.
radio podcast. This is bonus episode 2. This is our top 10 albums of 2020. So before we get started, quickly want to shout out social media. Go follow at Hivemind Radio _ on Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe to YouTube, etc., etc. But I also just want to preface this bonus episode with the fact that this is the last episode that's going out for the year of 2020. And we started this back in April, where we did our March recap. And back then, that was like just as COVID was happening and set the world on fire, basically. Figuratively, not literally.
Yeah, it literally went on fire like a month before, yeah.
But this podcast would not have happened without COVID. It's crazy that this all just happened because I could no longer do my radio show at college, and I wanted some other outlet to talk about my music. And I posted a tweet on Twitter, and then Quill, Justin, you were just like, yo, let me in on this. And then I was like, from there, it just formed into the four of us doing this together.
Don't remember that at all.
I remember it. That's like the entire story. I just think it's really awesome that as much as COVID sucks, it's kind of awesome to see how much this has grown over the past year that we've been doing this, since March at least. And yeah, that's all I want to say at the beginning of this episode, just to preface things, as this is the final episode of 2020. So, do you guys want to add anything on to that?
Nah, you've pretty much said
No, I
everything.
think you covered it.
Say.
Amen.
Exactly.
Oh man.
TLDR, shoutouts to viewers, shoutouts COVID. That's where we're
Yeah,
at.
COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we did get that one song by Landon Tours that we almost put on the podcast back in April.
Oh, yeah.
I'm an idiot. That was funny.
Oh,
Hey, we
man.
got the
Shout-outs COVID.
whole Vermicide Violence album.
That too.
Oh, exactly.
That's throwing it back. So yeah, I already shouted out social media, so I think that means we can get right into our top 10 albums of the year. We are getting right into it, unless you got anything else to say.
No, I was going to say, I think it's time to shout out our runner-up albums of the year.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
I don't have them.
yeah, I don't
I
have
could
like a
probably think of it
specific
off the
runner-up,
spot, though.
number 1 and number 2. My 2 runner-ups, Derek, these will make you very happy. I can almost
Okay.
guarantee it. The 2
Okay.
runner-ups for me are I Disagree by Poppy
Okay.
and Shapes by Self-Deception.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you're just
I'll
happy
leave
they
it.
aren't in the top 10 at least, right?
yeah, of course.
That's why I thought you
Of
would
course,
be pleasantly surprised by that. Both of them were in contention for that number 10 spot, but after re-listening to them and 2 other albums, did not make the cut for number 10. So I don't have too much more I want to add on to that. We actually have not talked about Self-Deception on this show, but I want to shout out a couple songs from there real quick, being TikTok, Brace for Impact, and Smoke You Out. And both are really solid. It's a solid album. I don't have too much else to say about it, though. It's just a solid album, in my opinion. Justin, do you have any runner-ups you want to mention before we get started?
Yeah, just like you, I got 2 of them. Not much else to say on them. I will. Well, they kind of do preface the theme of like the bottom probably 3 of my list. Falsetts, We Follow Lead the Way, and Blind Channel's Violent Pop. And mainly because, there are a couple of songs on there, like I can pick between, like, I'm going to listen to this every day or something, or I'm going to put this in my playlist to have them regular rotation.
Fire at will.
Yeah. But as a whole, for both of these albums, that's why they're kind of tied. I couldn't tell you, like, the theme they're going for. I couldn't tell you, the structure on like why the albums are structured this way. I just kind of feel like they're songs to put on a list, to put on a record, rather than trying to go for a cohesive album, and that's kind of why they didn't make my list.
Yeah, that's fair. I especially agree with that on Falset. Can't blame me for those.
There.
So my runner-ups, runner-up number 2, I guess 12th, would be Passenger by Kingdom of Giants.
That's an album that I intend to listen to before the end of the year. So
very,
that makes
very
me
good.
excited.
My, I guess, second or third, depending on, well, we'll get into that, but second or third favorite metalcore release of the year. a band that sounds like Architects and early Northlane got together and had a love child that was somehow better than both of those bands.
Excuse me?
I think so. Well, I don't like Architects, so that could be part of it. But
I didn't really
except
like
the new-
Architects either, and then they released Animal.
That's about where I'm at. And then my first runner-up, number 11, which until very recently was still in my top 10, is Everyone Loves You Once You Leave Them by the Amity Affliction. Barely missing my top 10 after, what would that be, a 9-month stint in my top 5. The more I went back and listened to it, the less high on it I was, but still incredible songs like Just Like Me and Soak Me in Bleach, the two that I like the most. And yeah, again, just barely missing the cut, but I'm pretty happy with my top 10 and subsequently leaving it at 11. So
Jacob.
So my runner-ups, I just made them up right now. Just picked them right now, literally within the past 2 minutes. But How to Survive a Funeral by Make Them Suffer, and again, Everyone Loves You Once You Leave Them by the Amity Affliction.
Glad we're on the same page.
With that, does that mean we're getting into our top 10?
I think so.
Let's go for it.
Similar to how we did our top 5 songs last week on the top 2 EPs, if anything overlaps, we'll mention that it's on our lists, but we won't mention where until we get to that point in our top 10 rank downs. So, and then for our top 3, if we talk about an album before the top 3 and it's in our top 3, don't mention it's in the top 3 because the top 3 are special. Okay? Cool?
It's okay.
Let's do it.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
So we're going to get started with my number 10 album of the year, hotly contested, as I mentioned. It lands on Brand New Vision by Point North.
Great album.
Yeah,
Great album, great
this
choice.
was a really fun album, and it's one that pleasantly surprised me. I did not expect this album to be nearly as good as it ended up being.
Mhm.
I think as much as Into the Dark kind of eclipsed for me within like the first week of me hearing it, and I haven't been as high on it since, it's still a fantastic song, super catchy. Kellen Quinn's amazing.
Yeah,
but then,
you know what? Yeah, I feel the same way about that. Like, I went back and listened to the album before this, and that song is honestly like one of the weaker of the album, and that's not a bad thing. The album itself as a whole is really good. It's just that one's been played to death. I feel like the other
yeah,
ones
I think that's exactly what happened to me.
have a
where-
bit
Yep.
more meaning.
That's where I'm at as well.
I played Into the Dark to death in the first like 2 weeks when I added it into my playlist, and it's like I go back and revisit it, and it's like, oh, it's that song again? Okay. Like it's not even a bad song. It's just I overplayed it too much, and that's only a fault of my own. I think there's a lot of other really notable tracks on this album. Most notably being No One's Listening and Apologue, I both really enjoyed. And I also want to give a shout out to Distant, which I think might be one of the most underappreciated tracks on the album. It does the slow, almost interlude-esque vibe perfectly. And it sounds like Point North, but it's completely different from everything else on the album, and I love Distant as a song. So I think the only thing that I can really critique it for is that it doesn't end on the strongest note. Nothing Left to Lose is a pretty solid song, but Be the Same, I've never been a huge fan of it, and that's really the only fault I can give it. It's a really solid album through and through. It's just that everything above it has a little bit more to offer, in my opinion. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Point North, Brand New Vision, my number 10 pick.
I agree wholeheartedly. This was a great album. Didn't quite make my top 10. I think I had it. Actually, I can tell you exactly where I had it here in a second.
Yeah, you have like a top 40.
Yeah, well, after the 40, I also have another top 255, so,
Is that actually all ordered?
I ended up getting to 295 albums and 110 EPs. So
Or what?
after a long and arduous process,
You're insane.
but yeah, no, I agree actually with the whole Into the Dark thing is actually ended up being like a mid-tier song off this album for me just because I played it too many times. And everything else too is so good on this. Thank you for shouting out Distant. I'm glad you and I agree. No One's Listening is the best song on the album. I actually, you and I feel the exact same about this because I feel like Be the Same isn't the strongest way to end this album.
Yeah,
off,
I think we do share pretty similar thoughts about this one.
Honestly, I don't know why I opened my mouth because I think you just said everything I wanted to say. But
Actually, no. If I remember correctly, you're a lot higher on A Million Pieces than I am.
I do enjoy A Million Pieces a lot.
I'm
Yeah,
still
that's
not
one
super
that's up
high
with
on
me.
that one, but it's a fine song.
This was number 22, in case you were curious.
Fair enough. I mean, out of what, 295? You said?
Yeah. So that's
number
what
22 is not bad.
Top 10%, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we take those.
Let's move on. Justin, your number 10 pick.
Yeah, so I kind of hinted at this with the honorable mentions. The bottom part of my list all kind of has a similar theme, but this one in particular is a standout of the bottom three. Paul Bartolome's "Screaming Through the Radio." It's my number 10.
I can't blame this pick.
No, I can't either.
There's a lot of good here. There's a lot of good features. Philip Strand, Matt Good, Johnny Craig,
Yep.
Paul's brother, David. There's a lot of good features here. There's a lot of good songs here. Run to You, Not Okay. Holy Water is also really good. But there's a lot of variance in this. I feel like as an album, it isn't cohesive and actually doesn't tell like a story. It's just, songs he wanted to produce and put in an album, which I'm not going to complain because it's a fucking good album. That's why it's on my list.
Mhm.
But there's also just not a story going on. I feel like I resonate more with albums that are trying to tell a beginning to an end rather than just trying to put a collective of songs together. That's why I can't put it too much higher on my list, but it's still a really good album.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm upset you didn't mention Roll with the Punches, which is my favorite song from the album. It's super anthemic. But I totally agree that there's a lot of variation on this album, but I do think some of it fell a little bit flat. I can't remember because I haven't gone back to this album too much throughout the year. But if you're looking for like a solid set of songs to just like listen to, like it's a great album. So I can't fault the pick at all.
Yeah, I remember the first time listening to this, I got to like track 7 or 8, I think it was, and I'm like, this could be a top 10 album of the year. And then it went on, and there were like 4 or 5 songs in a row where I just kind of sat there and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why are these here? They don't fit in with the rest of the album, that sort of thing. And that's what ultimately took it out of contention for me, and dropped it in my graces a little bit.
If the album was 3 or 4 tracks smaller, I feel like it would have been better.
Yeah, you give me a 10 or 11 album or song album like this and subsequently cut the ones that make it feel less cohesive, then you've got a really solid album either way, but you've got an especially solid one in that case. But I mean, either way, for an artist that's self-produced, no label, no promotion, anything like that.
It's only his
At least to
second
my
album,
knowledge.
too.
Yeah.
And he's already got big names like Philip, Johnny Craig.
Yeah, great.
He had Telly Smith on his first album.
Yeah, just overall great production, great everything here, a lot of potential. Go check it out.
Super underrated
album.
and
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
recognition for sure.
I'm pretty sure I literally found him because the Philip was a feature.
That's how it be sometimes.
That do how it be sometimes. That's all I got.
Derek.
I guess I'll take my number 10 then.
Yep.
My number 10 album of the year is A Quiet Place to Die by Alpha Wolf. Jacob, I'm curious, did this end up on your list as well?
This is on my list somewhere.
Okay, so I'll go first, and then as long as it's not in your top 3, you're free to take the wheel at any point.
Yep.
Okay, so this is one of the heaviest records I heard all year, and it's dethroned Absolute by Kublai Khan for my favorite, like, quote-unquote heavy record of all time. It's the first, like, official record with their new vocalist. I believe it's pronounced Lockie Keo, don't quote me on it. And then their old vocalist was Aiden, who left to form or was kicked out for sexual misconduct allegations, went on and formed Dealer. And then I think he got kicked out of Dealer again and Dealer disbanded. So I think he's cursed. But I think he fills that void perfectly, if not better than Aiden did. This album is a perfect blend of instrumental heaviness, vocal heaviness, and subject material heaviness. You have a song like Akudama, which I believe was in my top 10 songs of the year, if not runner up, that hits like a freight train in terms of instrumental and vocal heaviness. And then there's songs like The Closer, Don't Ask, which details someone attempting to cope with the suicide of a friend that they were too blind to notice because they were too busy trying to hold their own mental state together. So again, you've got that heaviness of Akudama, and then the lyrics from Don't Ask. Please don't ask me how I'm coping, because the truth is I'm not, and I don't want you to worry. I'll find a way to be okay for you. I should have said it before. I love you. I always will. I should have paid more attention, but everything moves so fast when you're on the edge of your own breakdown. Which is a surprising amount of emotion for a record that smacks you so bluntly in the face. And then, like, again, at the ending of the song, it repeats, "One day I'll be okay, and I'll say it again," as the song fades out. And it's honestly one of the best closers I've heard all year. They experiment a lot with melody in a song like Bleed For You, where it sort of does the Sam Carter Architects sing scream in the chorus with, I don't know who the feature is there, but it's a female vocalist. And I think my biggest takeaway from this record wasn't how good it was, but the fact that I spent enough time with it that I was able to juxtapose it with some of the other like metalcore records I heard during the year that I'd maybe considered a bit too heavy at the time. And because of how heavy this album was, I went back and enjoyed those other records more because they were softer than this one was. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like there's an album further ahead in the list that's a perfect example of that. But overall, a really good album that took me by surprise, especially because I think it was either last year or the year before when they released their EP, and I was like, this is way too heavy. I can't handle this. And now we've got an Alpha Wolf album in my top 10. The lead vocalist for Korn actually put out a video on Twitter. I don't know if any of you guys saw it, where he said that this was his favorite like album of the year or whatever. So hopefully they'll get more recognition going forth here, at least in a worldwide sense. But yeah, no, number 10 album, Alpha Wolf, Quiet Place to Die. Big fan, great heavy album, definitely recommend. And I'll turn it over to Jacob.
So, yeah, this is like the only album on my list that'll make me want to start a one-man mosh pit.
Yeah.
And yeah, literally, like every time I listen to it, I feel like getting up and doing something. Like I don't know. I feel like it's a good replacement for, or not replacement's the wrong word, but like a good album to go to instead of what I would usually go to if I was really pissed off. I would usually go to A Different Shade of Blue by Knocked Loose. This is now what I would go to instead. And
could you imagine a tour? Knocked Loose and Alpha Wolf? Oh, somebody would die in the pit, man.
And Kublai
there would be there would be a mosh pit in the mosh pit.
I've already almost crowd killed my lamp to Akudama. Nobody would be safe.
But then you get like lyrics like, I think it's in Restricted. Lyrics like, if I were you, I'd want to kill myself too. And the song is about abuse, right? And wow.
Well, I mean, the video in and of itself, I think.
Yeah, the video is incredible too. Watch that.
Daughter being, I think, sexually abused by her dad, and she ends up stabbing him to death. So that's the type of subject material we're going with
that
here.
Music video was my first exposure to Alpha Wolf.
Oh, wow. that's one hell of a way to get introduced.
That's like that song and Akudama are really the only two that I even vaguely know. Akudama goes hard. That's like that's like the only comment I can make. I haven't listened to it in full yet. I've just heard a couple of songs here and there.
Like even like the intro, the what's it called? A Quiet Place to Die. Yeah, the build up, everything about this album is just so aggressive, and I love it.
It's a 38-minute gut punch in the best possible way.
I think I mentioned in the episode we reviewed it, my dog likes to join in when I start my one-man mosh pit.
Dude, if I was chilling in the pit and somebody's dog crowd killed me, I don't even know how I'd react. Like, what do you do in that scenario? Like,
How big of a dog are we talking?
well, I don't know. I mean, like, you get like 100-pound shepherd or something, that, like tackles, or somebody like picks up their corgi and like hurls it at you in the middle of the pit. Like,
What would a German Shepherd do in a mosh pit? That would be a good experiment.
exactly. I think there's only one way to find out, fellas. Oh, dude, no. Okay, you bring it to a knocked loose show. This is a horrible tangent. I'm so sorry. You bring the dog to the knocked loose show, and then right before the breakdown, you have him bark into the mic.
Like
We get the arf arf.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, then,
Oh jeez.
do we want to
On that note, Jake.
I guess it's still my turn, right? For
Yeah.
number 10.
Yeah,
I was like, Jake, do your number 9. I'm like, wait, no, it's my turn still.
it is in fact your turn.
So, my number 10 album is All Time Lows, Wake Up Sunshine.
Nice pick.
And-
So, well, I was gonna say this is also on my list. I don't know if it's on anybody else's list here
Not
as well.
on mine,
Didn't make mine.
Okay.
but I will say that I am upset that I didn't listen to it back in April when we talked about it,
Yeah,
because I then gave myself an excuse to put it off for 7 months, or not 7 months, for like 5 months. And
yeah. Remember all
that's
those
5
times where we
months.
told you to listen to it and you didn't?
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
who was it? Was it you, Justin? I think because I remember Derek.
I think it
like,
was. It was
praising-
either me or
praising it.
Derek.
I can't. Either way, whoever suggested it, I know Derek did. Thank you. Because
Yes,
I
sir.
would. I would not
I will
have
say
listened-
you're welcome, just because I
Yeah,
want to
you
feel.
go ahead.
There's a
Because-
collective hive mind. You're welcome.
Honestly, I wouldn't have listened to it if you guys didn't tell me to. So
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, we're here to tell everybody.
This is the essence of the hive mind.
Pretty
And
much.
I'm telling all you people watching
Listening.
or listening, whatever platform you're on, go listen to it.
You heard
Yeah.
that?
Why should they? Why should they? Tell me why.
It is good.
Hell yeah. Okay.
I don't know what else you expected.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not the first time that's happened. Where it's
No.
like,
It's
explain why. It good.
It's good.
Okay, you get songs like Sleeping In, Melancholy Kaleidoscope, Wake Up Sunshine, all favorites of mine. Then you get Basement Noise, which is like, I guess like a nostalgia trip for the band, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go back in time and what it was like when they're in the early days of the band. What like the line says, "Stupid boys in the basement making basement noise."
In the
that's how it
basement,
goes.
noise in the basement. Yeah.
Yes. It's such a simple song, and I just love it so much, and I think that's my favorite song on the album. I don't know. There's a lot of
Really?
good songs,
Yeah.
I have
but
not. I have not gone back to the full album since the first time I listened to it, but I do remember enjoying Basement Noise a lot. I didn't add it to my playlist because it was like kind of different. It's not something that I would want to go revisit by itself super often, but like as the closing to the album, it was a fantastic close.
I think it gets overlooked because it's very repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably what it is.
I will say it's very surreal to see this band as much of a pop culture hit as they are
Yeah,
now. With
the
especially with their
features.
last album, Last Young Renegade, just felt like it came and went. It didn't really feel like anyone was like listening to it at the time. But now it just seems like a lot of people are definitely like appreciating and watching this band now.
I'm gonna be honest. This is my first all-time low album, so I
Really?
actually haven't listened to any others.
Yeah, I've been a fan of All Time Low since Nothing Personal. So I've been like into this band for a while. This was probably like my first like punk band, I would say.
I've gone pretty deep into this band's discography, only halfway by choice. This is my girlfriend's favorite band, and so she tried very hard to put me onto them on multiple occasions, and nothing was really doing it for me before this album. The lead single, Some Kind of Disaster, was the one that really hooked me onto All Time Low. My expectations for this prior to it dropping were kind of muddled because outside of Sleeping In, the next like 5 singles that dropped, I wasn't really a big fan of outside of maybe Trouble Is.
Yeah.
I know you listed 3 of the singles as your favorites on this one.
Are they all
Jacob.
singles? I don't know.
There are 8 singles on this album.
Of course, it's
The first 7 tracks on the album dropped prior, and then Monsters featuring Black Bear dropped the day of as a single and got its own video or whatever. Outside of Monsters, I think that the strongest tracks on this album are actually after the first 8 singles.
Huh.
I enjoy the second half of the album. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's not like I don't like the first 7 or 8 songs or whatever. I think they're all good. I think that everything after Pretty Venom is better. And I thought it was interesting that Pretty Venom, I believe, is track 8 and splits the album into 2 parts, the singles and the non-singles. And Pretty Venom is my favorite all-time low song. It's my favorite song off the album. It was in my top 10 for both favorite songs of the year and most listened to songs of the year. And the song I revisited the most, obviously. You mentioned that Basement Noise was nostalgic, and I agree. I think that there's like the album as a whole is very like upbeat and happy, but there's kind of I mean, obviously with Melancholy Kaleidoscope, but there's a melancholy and nostalgic feel to some of the songs. Especially songs like Clumsy.
My favorite song.
Yeah, it feels like quintessential all-time low. Like you could have slapped that on an album like Future Hearts or Nothing Personal, and it feels like it would have fit in. I think that this is their best album, both in terms of like how much I enjoy it and just as a whole. Like this feels like you took all of what made All Time Low good in the past, and for me, added some new experimentation and made it better. I think that my least favorite track on here is probably Favorite Place featuring the band Camino. That track doesn't really do much for me. Not to say that it's like bad or anything. It just feels okay on what is otherwise a really good album. But the way that each of the tracks flow, even though it's a 15-track album, it doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome at all. Like I feel like it's 15 tracks, but it doesn't feel like 15 tracks, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because none of the songs feel like they drag on for too long. I thought it was interesting that you said Basement Noise was your favorite because I absolutely hated that song on first listen. I was like, this song is repetitive and stupid and I don't like it. And then I listened to the album all the way through a couple more times and I paid more attention to the lyrics, and it ended up being one of my favorite songs in the album. So if nothing else, it's a lesson in the importance of revisiting songs and revisiting albums. But yeah, no, I'm really glad this made your list because it made mine as well, obviously. But I would have expected it more to make the list of Justin rather than you. But the fact that you enjoyed it so much it's nice to hear that somebody else has some appreciation for this album in the group, to the point that they put it in their top 10.
Oh yeah, and especially when it's someone that doesn't frequent the band as grow.
Exactly. I wouldn't expect the man who introduced me to Chelsea Grin to put All Time Low on his top 10 list, but
as he said last time,
he's gone softer. Yeah.
We go from Alpha Wolf to All Time Low.
So weird.
Poor Justin and Jake are never going to get to talk. I listen to album, you got it on your top 10. You listen to album, I got on my top 10. Let me hear about Jake's number 9 if nobody else has anything to say on this.
My number 9 pick is a band that I have been wanting to talk about on this for a while. We just barely missed them because we did our first episode back in March. This was an album that came out in February. This is In Love, in Hope, in Peace by Fight the Fade. That's where I go. So I have
surprised that made your top 10.
Yeah, after re-listening to it, this album sits in a weird place for me because a majority of the album, the release structure for this album was really strange. We got the first 2 singles last year in Everything Is Fine and What's Left, both of which fantastic. And then in January, they released like 4 songs in the span of 2 weeks or something like that. By the time the album came, we only ended up with 4 new songs, and that made it strange to listen to on first listen. But every song, bar maybe 1 or 2, which didn't stand out as much, I think mostly in the name of Consumed was the one that didn't really stand out too much. Every other song on this album is fantastic. I want to give special shout-outs to Wild Ones and The Answer. I'll get back to What's Left later. But in particular, The Answer, which is the closing track on this album, I think lyrically, it's very hard to do a song so simplistic with such deep meaning. and I think this song does it perfectly. Where the meaning of the song is that you hold all these feelings within you, and then when you want to go let it out, everyone has that place where they go let out those feelings. But they never say where that place is in the song. The chorus is just, and that's where I go. And it leaves it up for interpretation on when you're feeling down, when you're feeling out, you go to the place that makes you feel happy, that makes you feel comfortable with letting it all out. But it doesn't matter what that is, and I love that as a closer. Not to mention, it's just a fantastic song to listen to, but the message behind it just adds on to it as well. And then otherwise, there's other incredible songs on there. Wild Ones being my favorite song on the album. My most played one, actually, not favorite. The Answer is my favorite. But Wild Ones is amazing, has a sick breakdown to it. Some really cool electronic elements in it, and some very motivational, uplifting lyrics as well. And then What's Left, I have some lyrics from What's Left that I want to point out that I think have really deep meaning, especially with like the modern era with like social media, where the bridge into the chorus is, if you look behind my highlight reel, you'll see how empty I feel. And I think, and then it goes into the chorus, which is like, I poured out what's left of me, or whatever. And I think the message is very fitting to the modern world. And overall, it's just a fantastic album, if you can't tell from how much I've been talking about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pretty much echo everything you said. It's a really good album. I think I didn't give enough of a chance when it came out, and then I just never got the chance to go back to it until recently, and it just like probably top 15 of my album list. Otherwise, I'm pretty much gonna echo everything you said. It's good.
I think the last thing I want to mention with this album, that there's a surprising amount of variation on this album, where you get like the normal, just like kind of rock stuff in there, but then you get a song like Heart, which has some acoustics and is more emotional. And then you get Everything Is Fine, which is a super glitchy track. And then there's also Consumed, which kind of follows up in that same... There's a lot of variation throughout this entire album, and none of it feels like it strays too much from the sound that they're going for. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about this album, Fight the Fade.
Yeah, I don't think I could add much more. I only really ever gave this song one listen, and then I gave The Answer quite a bit of time, personally. But yeah, overall, no. Great pick. I agree with everything you said. I'm not quite as high on it as you were. If I cared enough to look, I could probably find it on like what position it ended up in. But you know, I think if I did that for everything, I might start some controversy, because it's all fun and games. So somebody's top 10 pick ends up at like number 250. So I'll probably leave that one out. But no, great pick.
Let's move on to Justin.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny you guys were talking about all-time low earlier, and going from like that punk rock to kind of a more kind of poppy punk. I feel like this band that is my number 9 kind of hits that, going from punk, but honestly going a bit more heavier in their latest album, and what kind of pushed me into getting into the band and getting into their sound. So I'm going to pick a Silverstein's, or Silverstein as Jake called it, A Beautiful Place to Drown.
Back to the voice in my head like you know it's too fast, too close.
Don't remind me.
The Canada boys.
Yeah, man. So this album, I really didn't know of the band until I linked Bad Habits in our Discord. And that's when I really started listening to it, and then I listened to Burn It Down, because that was another single they had out at the time. And then when the album dropped, I don't think I listened to it when it dropped, but I listened to Madness, and that was the one that hooked me on the album. So I was like, oh shit, I need to listen to this. And I feel like it's a really good album that strays away from that punk, that, you know, very, very punk emo-esque sound they started out with in the first couple albums, and really goes into the kind of more the heavier sound of it, the heavier kind of rock attitude. My favorite tracks being Where Are You, Shapeshift, Madness, Say Yes, Burn It Down and Bad Habits are also really good, but I guess Infinite. But the ones that have stayed in my playlist have been like Madness and Say Yes. And I actually just within the last month added Where Are You when I went back and listened to the album. But all in all, it's really good. The only reason it's not much higher is while it's instrumentally, I'd say better than Paul Bartolome's album. I would say there isn't a lot of memorable tracks for me. I feel like the instrumentals kind of just blend together a little bit in a couple of the tracks, and why I can't really place it much higher because of that. But all in all, it's a solid album. It's very much a surprise for me this year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't have too much to add.
I'm willing to echo that. Yeah, absolutely. At times, some of the songs on here blurred together for me a little bit, which is why I wasn't super comfortable putting it like high on my list. But no, I can see why you picked this as your number 9. It's overall, outside of my couple grievances, which I guess are kind of personal, as opposed to objective, great album. Each of the features really add to each of the individual songs. And oh no, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I can't blame you.
Yeah, I also think it's very weird that it all-time low, what they used to sound like, with like Don't Panic and So Wrong It's Right. I feel like is how they're sounding is how Silverstein is sounding now.
Yeah, you're right.
It's kind of that sound, and you know what? I'll jive with it, but you know, I kind of want to see a heavier album in the next one. No, go a bit more of the heavier vocals, the harsher vocals that they had in Madness. That'd be really good. But that's all I got.
This is an album I feel like I really need to revisit because I haven't listened to it since whenever it came out.
Yeah, I probably need to do the same because Infinite is the only track that I really seem to have any inclination to ever go back to.
Yeah, I think you might like Madness now that you've kind of that Derek and Jacob have kind of soiled you into the metalcore scene. I think you need to go back and listen to a couple other tracks. I think you might like Madness at the very least.
It definitely benefits from re-listens. I mean, this album as a whole.
Yeah, I agree.
It gets a lot better the more you listen to it.
But speaking of listening, what did you listen to and put as your number 8, Derek?
Number 9.
Number 9.
9. That's a number.
Math.
It is indeed a number. This is an album that I don't think anybody else here has heard because I haven't really mentioned this artist at all. We didn't mention it on the podcast, so I'll try to be brief about it. My number 9 album of the year is I'm Here For You by an artist called Harry Hudson.
You're amazing, you're killing it. 'Cause I still got your ring around my neck when the fire started burning through my head. I love you.
I remember you bringing up. Did you bring up this guy in the part 1 bonus episodes? Because I feel like either you mentioned it there or you mentioned it like in our group chat or something.
Yes, so this was, I believe, my number 7 album of the, or number 7 song of the year was one of the singles off of this album called "Let Me." The connection here is that I found him through Alec Benjamin because he was supposed to be on tour with him before Rona came along. So anyway, I discovered him accordingly back in September, and this album got released on the first Friday of December, and I didn't know it was coming out. So it took me by surprise and immediately shot its way to the position on my list. It's kind of like a cross between, this is a weird crossover here, but it's a cross between Drake, Kaleo, the artist who does Way Down We Go, and Eden. It's an interesting mix that works really well. It details a relationship between the vocalist and an unnamed girl that ends up as like an off and on type of relationship, like a I hate you, I love you sort of thing, where the vocalist finds other girls to fill that void when he and his girlfriend aren't together. And the album ultimately ends with him realizing that no other girl can fill that void, but he realizes it too late because she's already moved on to someone else. The closer, titled Meet Again, details that last bit that I mentioned pretty well. There's a nice little production touch of a chirping bird towards the end of a song. The pitch of it creates like this imagery of a bird hopping around, kind of lost, looking for its mate. And also the sort of thing of like, if you love something, set it free. That the whole like metaphor with like a bird, if you let it go, it'll come back to you, that sort of thing. The order of the songs for this album really worked to bring that concept together, and it creates like this roller coaster narrative of the ups and downs. There aren't any songs in here that aren't good, I don't think, but there are definitely ones that are set apart from the others. I wasn't super convinced by this album until track 9. It's a 15-track album, and that track 9 to track 15 is one of the best 7-song runs I've ever heard. The past couple of days, I've just gone back and listened to those 7 songs over and over again. Really, it spans multiple genres, like the album as a whole. It's got its roots in like indie rock, but it ventures into an alt rock song on sounds like "Cut Me Down" or chill hip hop on songs like "Just Slide," featuring Jaden Smith of all people, Will Smith's son. Overall, it's a record that works very well in terms of like individual songs and in concept, and I'm really happy that I found this artist both this year and that I found out that this album released, because if we got into 2021 and I hadn't found it, I'd probably like slap myself for not having found it sooner and able to put it on my top 10, because it really is just a great chill album to listen to front to back. But I don't have anything much more to say on it, and unless you guys have ever heard of this artist before, I think we're good to move on to
I haven't, man.
I will
Jacob's
take
number 9.
I will take 5% credit for putting you onto Alec Benjamin, which put you
Exactly.
On the
There we go. Jacob, hit me with your number 9.
My number 9 album of the year is Picturesque's Do You Feel Okay?
I'm surprised by this
Are you?
a little bit. I don't remember you being as high on this as.
See,
I don't know.
I went back to it. I
Got
went
it.
back to it, and it's really good.
Man, I'm really liking this new Jacob we have.
Exactly.
I told
the
you, I told you
post-hardcore Jacob.
it's the soft Jacob. I've gone soft. So I think I like this band because they sound like Too Close to Touch. To be honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
Of all things in this album, I found myself loving the drums,
Ooh.
which is really weird. Which is really weird because normally I'm not really a drum guy, and I think it's Prey. It's Prey. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Prey. With is my favorite drum song. I'll call
Okay.
it. And then you get like really emotional songs like Prisoner or Day by Day. Day by Day is fucking amazing. I'll talk about it later. And then you get Necessary, which is like basically asking the question, crap, I lost my train of thought. Wanting somebody to care about you, to feel something for you. And then you get like Attention, which is like kind of the opposite. Not really the opposite. It's different. It's like I don't want like you,
Baby.
just your attention. Yeah, man. Yeah. And that, okay, I'm gonna go talk about Day by Day because it's fucking amazing.
Do it.
The emotion in this song is fucking off the charts. Like it's like a picture almost. Picturesque.
Wow! You just made that joke.
I literally just made that up on the spot. I'm not even kidding.
Let's go.
But it's about, I guess, a girl he knows, or it isn't. I don't know if it's necessarily a girl. Anyway, it's about someone. What's the vocalist name?
Kyle, I believe.
Kyle. He's talking, and the girl is under a lot of emotional or mental stress, and it's basically Kyle dealing with trying to help her through this mental stress, and I don't know, I just really connect with this song. I don't yeah.
No, absolutely. It's my second favorite song on the album, so I'm really glad that you've got a similar appreciation for it.
I think I like it just for the lyrics, dude.
Yeah, honestly.
Because not in sound, I wouldn't say it's my favorite because
It's more acoustic,
slow.
somber, slow, yeah. I thought you bringing up that juxtaposition between Necessary and Attention was interesting. I'd never thought about that. That, like, Necessary is like, I wish that you would give me attention, and then the song entitled Attention is actually I don't want your attention, right?
Well,
like I don't want you.
I don't want
you
Like I
just
don't
your
want like
attention.
a relationship. I don't. I just want attention. Basically.
Right.
It's kind of the opposite of, or not the opposite. It's
It's in the
It's
same
different.
vein, but it's
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
yeah.
I want to know who hurt Kyle to make him make this album, because like the song I revisited the most from this is "Holding Me Down," which I think is the biggest example of that emotional pull on this album. It's very in tune with a lot of like pop culture. It's like millennial core, I guess is a way to put it. Like, though, I mean, the concept of like swipe, like you swipe right or I
Yeah.
guess left, whatever, however Tinder works, on all your problems, and like try to hide them beneath a facade, like that sort of thing. Like it's very emotionally charged, but there's enough room for hooks that make it feel sort of like a poppier post-hardcore at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, barely missed my top 10. I think I have it at like 13 or 14 or something like
And
this.
that's just about where it falls for me as well.
Yeah, I've been following this band since right after their debut dropped for Back to Beautiful, and this is, I mean, that album was good, but this is such an incredible improvement.
This is only a sophomore album. Like what the fuck?
It's so good. It's so good. Everything about this album is just really, really good. I'm glad this made your list.
I don't have too much to add, really. I'd just be echoing most of what you guys are saying, other than the fact that Day by Day is actually my least favorite song on this album. But we'll just move on from that.
You haven't read
exactly.
the
Are
lyrics.
y'all ready to talk about my number 8 pick? Can
Exactly.
we just
Hit
move
me
on
with
from
it.
that?
Yes, sir.
My number 8 pick. This I don't know if there's a good way to preface it. It's The Path by Fit for a King.
Ooh.
Huh. Okay.
I didn't think this would make your list at all. I'm shocked.
There is not a bad song on this album.
Oh. Metalcore Twitter's going to hate you for that one.
I really enjoy a lot of this album. I think, I can't say, like, as I said, there's not a bad song on this album. I think there's really only, like, maybe 2 songs that are a little more forgettable than the rest. And even then, saying which 2 might spark some controversy in saying Stockholm and Vendetta.
Oh.
And otherwise, I really enjoyed this album from top to bottom. It's just some good-ass metalcore. But I do want to add on to this, in that I think this opinion is heavily, heavily biased from the fact that I have never heard any previous material from this band. The fact that this is my first experience with this band, I think, says a lot, because a lot of people, from what I've been able to tell, compare it to previous albums, and this is a step down from that. But I don't have that high expectation going into this, and I don't have that high expectation to compare it to. And when I look at it at its face value, from what I've heard, I really enjoyed it. So
That's fair.
That's the best way to go about it, really.
yeah. My
You're
opinion
lucky.
very well could, yeah, like, I think it's very much, this is my number 8 album pick by circumstance, because if I had been into this band for the past 2 years or so, since Dark Skies came out, who knows, maybe this isn't my number 8 album of the year. But because this is my only experience with the band and I thoroughly enjoyed it, I had to put it on my list. But I couldn't put it any higher than this. It's just some good ass metalcore from top to bottom. God of Fire is fantastic. Louder Voice is amazing. Locked in My Head has more of that radio rock feel, but if you're gonna do radio rock, that's how you do it right, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't have too much to say. I just really enjoyed this album.
I think it's an interesting perspective is that if you're coming from like Dark Skies and previous material to this, you might be let down. But if you enjoy The Path, then pretty much everything else in their discography is going to be good for you as well. Like going, I guess, if you were to consider their older stuff the front and this the back, if you're going front to back, it might make this seem not as good. But if you're going back to front, then it's only up from here, or like you've only got good things to expect. So I almost envy you in that sense, because this was not my first exposure to the band. I think the last 4 songs, God of Fire, Stockholm, Louder Voice, and Vendetta, are the highlight of this album. I think it's very clear to me from that Q&A that they did after that live stream that the band put a lot of the effort and time into this, and it's good that they made something that people are considering like quote unquote dad rock, radio rock, whatever, that they put time and effort into it as opposed to doing it just for the sake of trying to grow. That if they can put effort and heart and soul into an album and grow in the process, then good on them. It's just that the first 6 tracks in this album were really not for me, and I think that's what was keeping it away from the top half of my list. But again, I think that's coming from the perspective of somebody who's not into the Parkway Drive style of metal, which is what a lot of the first part of this is.
I think going off that, I think you have to see Parkway Drive live to like them. I'm serious. They are amazing live.
Yeah, there have been plenty of bands like that. I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of bands like Architects too. I feel like I'm missing something. It's just that's a band that hasn't clicked for me yet. And in that same vein, this album hasn't clicked for me yet outside of those last 4 tracks, which almost feel more like quintessential Fit for a King, something you get off Dark Skies, than say Breaking the Mirror or Locked in My Head.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. Do we want to move on?
Bells are good.
Yeah,
that's true.
The bells. The bells in this album, whenever they are included, fantastic. Clap it up for the bells. Justin, your number 8 pick. Let's get into it.
Surprisingly, to no one's shock, this album has no bells. Sorry to disappoint, but no, we need a new name in this top list. So I'm gonna throw in Final Stories, Savage Soul. My number 8.
This is an album that you have been trying to get me to listen to for a while now.
I tried so hard.
And once you told me that the vocalist of Future Palace featured on one of the songs on this album, I instantly went and gave it a listen, and I'm definitely going to listen to this album eventually, so I'm excited to see what you have to say about it.
Yeah, the female vocalist of Future Palace, Maria Lessing, featured on the 8th track of this album. But this album in general, it's really good. I was shocked to find an album that has the post-hardcore kind of metalcore with a more like hard rock sound. You wouldn't really recognize it. It's a much heavier, I think Five Finger Death Punch is what I can best compare them to. The reason why it's not much higher on my list is because the instrumentals of a lot of the songs sound very similar. But when you go back and you listen to them just one by one and not as a full album, they're good. Like if I just told you to go listen to Closer or listen to one of my favorite tracks, does Fall, you might like that song. But if you listen to the full album, you might get a little bit tired of it. And that's why I can't put it much higher. But as a whole, this is probably spoilers for the rest of the album, or rest of my list, probably the heaviest album I have on my list.
I listened to 295 albums this year, and I did not hear this one, so I can't really offer anything much on it. But
I think this came out the same day as Galleon's Metropolis.
You're kind of selling me on it, though. I like post-hardcore mixed with hard rock. I'm gonna have to check this out eventually.
Yeah, it's very much on the heavier side of kind of metalcore. It's not screamo or anything like that, but there's a lot of heavier vocals mixed in a lot of the songs, and I think you would like it probably the best out of here, Derek. But I don't know. Jacob surprised me more. Might, but no. I only listened to this band. I think I found them through Discover Weekly, and found out they put an album out the first couple of weeks of this year, and was shocked to find I liked it. But that's all I got.
All right. So we're on number 8, right?
Yes, number 8.
My number 8 album of the year is The Way It Ends by Currents. I want to know if anybody else has this on their list. Please. Somebody, anybody. I'm begging you. Oh my goodness.
Sorry, man.
Criminal, man. I I guess this spoils a bit of the rest of my list, but this was the best metalcore record I heard all year, and it aged beautifully. I I mentioned during Alpha Wolf that their album helped me open my mind to other albums that I heard this year and made them seem softer. Just because I spent way too much time with Akudama, and this was definitely one of those albums. My first couple of listens, pre Alpha Wolf, had me saving like 4 or 5 of the songs off of this album. I believe it's 11 tracks, and not caring much about the rest because I thought they were quote unquote too heavy. But after I listened to enough of Alpha Wolf and went back and gave the songs a couple more listens, they presented themselves kind of like in a new light, and I found myself enjoying the heavier tracks a lot more than I had before. This album is about struggling with mental health, namely anxiety and depression, and the way that it impacts both you and the people around you. It's a concept that's kind of been beaten to death by almost every artist in the scene ever. But Currents deliver it in a way that's extremely well executed, even if it's not super like groundbreaking or anything. The album starts out on an incredible note with Never There, which is kind of a cross between Uncleans and spoken word. Kind of a tangent. I didn't realize that the same vocalist did Cleans and Uncleans for this band.
Come on.
Yeah, sorry. I don't have my Currents lore on lock. But that made it all the much more impressive to me. But yeah, no, the intro is an emotional backdrop for the album and contextualizes a lot of what the album is trying to convey. And the delivery of I Drink Till I Can't Blink in the opener is one of my favorite deliveries of the year. This doesn't happen very often. I think, like I mentioned, with All Time Low would be the other exception. But the singles off this album are the songs I like the least. Namely A Flag to Wave, which I feel like is too anthemic and doesn't fit with the rest of the message of the album. But Split, which is kind of a deep cut, and my second favorite track off the album, offers a good example of some of that great lyricism I mentioned. Will we ever find the art in the atrophy, shame painted on the walls, etched in the stone, cold face of me dying alone? That being my second favorite, Better Days is my favorite track and one of the best tracks I've heard all year, as well as one of the best closers I heard all year.
Yep.
That riff in the pre-chorus, I think you guys know what I'm talking about, is amazing. And the steady progression of the way the song goes makes you feel the song, I guess, in a very unique way. I think that the instrumentals kind of carry this album in a sense. They assist the delivery based on their tone in a way that's like masterfully executed. I don't know. This is another one of those albums that revisits definitely help, Alpha Wolf or no Alpha Wolf. But overall, I really enjoyed this album, and it was the most emotional metalcore release I heard all year. And again, like the best metalcore release I heard all year. Really a great year for metalcore. There were a lot of stuff in the like top, I guess, 11 to 20 that didn't make my top 10 that majority metalcore albums that I felt were very, very good. And overall, this was the shining light amongst them all.
I'm going to keep my comments on this album brief, but this is definitely an album that I need to re-listen to eventually. Better Days is like the only memorable song on this album for me, and then like 2 lines of the chorus of A Flag to Wave, and everything else is just a blur to me. Like I don't remember anything. Definitely an album I need to revisit. Shout out Currents, local CT boys. That's all.
So I'm kind of the opposite with the singles. Like when they were released, I was like, these are okay. And then when I heard them in the context of the album, I was like, wow, these are so good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think that they're bad songs necessarily. I just think that they're outshined by a lot of what would be considered like the deep cuts or I guess non-singles in general. But I don't know, overall, great album. Jacob.
Yeah.
Let me hear it.
What are we on? 8?
8.
Yes.
Number 8 album of the year is Red Declaration.
Okay.
I'm surprised Justin. Okay, I was gonna say Justin. Why'd you say anything?
No, sorry.
I
I have a cat in my background. But yeah, I unfortunately just didn't hit my list. But hey, I'm happy for more Red fans.
I think I've said this before, but this is probably the band I've had the longest history with on my list. Like I've been listening to them since their first album, which is I'm gonna guess 2007.
Yeah, just about
somewhere around there. Like I'm not as high as on them as I used to be, but I think hearing how they've evolved their sound, and this album is definitely their heaviest album, I'd say. Instrumentally heavy, and it's got the violins.
It does got the
knowing
violin.
knowing that Eminence was your number one album of 2019, hearing that does not make me surprised that it's on your list.
I don't know. I'm just a sucker for violins, so
It do got the violins.
I think I like the direction they're going, like the heavier, even heavier, because over time my music taste has gotten heavier. Like I started out with like this band, and they kind of got me into like screaming in music, and then I went to like straight to like the first metalcore band I listened to was For Today, and I kind of left like rock in the back, and like this band kind of got left behind. But I'm glad to see they're still making music, and it's still really, really good.
This
Yeah,
album was entirely crowdfunded, right?
I was literally
I think
about
so,
to
yeah.
say that. Yeah, it was 100% crowdfunded.
That's cool. I think they raised something like $50,000 for the production of this album. I think was the GoFundMe
Just
thing,
about.
something like that. But this didn't land too high for me. I've never been super high on this band. I've tried.
I think it's the nostalgia for me.
Well, even just their older material
Oh,
too.
Yeah.
You guys have talked a lot about it, and so I tried really hard to get into it, and I couldn't. But it doesn't mean it's not good. This land is a good, not great album for me. What's up?
I hate to interrupt. That GoFundMe got $100,000.
Well, good for them.
Yeah,
good
very
for
much
for
good for
them.
them.
Absolutely. Well, the way I understand is they dropped their record label so they could have freedom of expression or whatever.
Correct.
And good on their fans for being willing to help them fund that, and good on them for delivering an album that was so well crafted. I didn't revisit this album a lot, but I remember thinking that it was very well produced, well put together. And you know, if that's what it takes for them to put out material like that without a label, then good. I hope it was successful for them, and they got that return on investment from this, because you know it's refreshing to see fans so invested in a band like that.
Yeah, for sure. So does that bring it back around to me? Unless Jacob, you have anything to add?
No, that's it.
For my number 7 album of 2020, I've got Stand Atlantic, Pink Elephant.
You up and down like a yo-yo. It's not the way you wanna walk home. I think you find me kinda weird though. Oh no.
Okay, this is also in my top 10.
All right. Very cool. Very awesome. So this, I want to quickly preface this by, I actually had this higher on my list, when I woke up this morning. And then I re-listened to an album that we will be talking about as my number 6 pick, which, bumped it up to number 7. But regardless, Pink Elephant is the most fun album that I heard all year, bar none.
Easily.
It is so incredibly fun. You are just, it's just fun.
I had that written almost verbatim, so I'm really glad we're on the same page.
It's like keyboard spam fun. Like that's just all this album is. You have incredible songs like Evil Eye Go, which is just like, what the fuck is an Evil Eye Go? I mean, they put that on their shirt.
They put it on the shirt, man.
Like, what the fuck is an Evil Eye Go? I don't care what the fucking Evil Eye Go is. I am banging
It's
that
a good
shit.
song,
Like,
exactly.
It's a good-ass song. It's one of the best songs on this album.
Mm-hmm.
Jurassic Park, same thing. It's a silly ass song, but it is hella fun. I think my personal favorite would probably be Wavelength, in close contention with Evil Eye Go, which took me a few listens to really grow on it, but it's so replayable and so memorable to me that I have struggled to put it down throughout the year. And I just really appreciate that touch of, in the final chorus where it's like, tripping on the wavelength, and it's like actually kind of like, the audio is like distorting in and out. I think that was just a really nice touch for the song that I really appreciated. The only kind of disappointment I can mention with this album is the one experimental track in Silk and Satin, which never really stuck for me. But otherwise, through and through, an incredibly fun album that I'm really glad that I got to listen to this year. That's all I have to say.
this was one of my more anticipated albums of the year. I found them in 2018 through Songs That Saved My Life. They did a cover of Your Graduation. Their debut album was Skinny Dipping, I believe, and it felt like they had yet to find their sound. And I'm really happy that it seems like they found their sound here. Like beforehand, it felt like they were following the rules of a good pop punk album, and they made a good pop punk album. But this feels like it's a loose adaptation of those rules, and it makes something uniquely all its own, and the band is like much better off for it. I think it's interesting that you mentioned Silk and Satin. Bonnie, their lead singer, mentioned on Instagram that they wrote this song because, quote, fuck it, why not?
That's the energy of this entire album, to be honest.
Well, I mentioned that, like,
But,
it feels like they didn't have any constraints here. They were given pens and paper, and, like, track 8, do what you want. They were told, do what you want. And they did what they wanted, and that was whatever the fuck they wanted. That's really the whole premise of this album. It's whatever they were feeling at the time, and it comes together to create, like you said, probably the most fun record I heard all year. I feel like the lyricism doesn't make sense at times.
But it
like you
doesn't
mentioned
have
with-
to.
Right, exactly. It feels like the vocals in that sense are not meant to be profound. They're kind of like, I guess, in a sense, John Mess lyrics, that they're not meant to mean anything. They're meant to convey melody and used as like an extra instrument of sorts. Like the way that her voice conveys on Jurassic Park, nothing in that song makes sense, but you combine it with the melody of the instruments and it creates something that brings it to a top 5 song of the year for me. They do have profound lyricism on tracks like Drink to Drown, which is a somber note on an otherwise very upbeat album, and honestly one of the better songs on the album.
Yeah, that song grew on me a bunch when the album came out. I was not high on it as a single, but in the context of the album, it's great.
Yeah, this album delivered tenfold. I'm really glad that we got it, and I'm interested to see where the band goes from here, because it feels like they've shook off the shackles of trying to follow traditional pop punk and instead found a subdivision of the genre that they've made all their own.
I don't have too much to add, so
No, Jake. Well, real quick, Jacob or Justin, do you guys have any thoughts on this? Because I think you both listened to it, right?
Yeah, I listened to it when we were all listening to it. I didn't go back to it, but it's in my
same.
honorable mentions. It's like number 14, I think.
Well, Justin,
All right.
then what was your number 7?
So my number 7 was I've already kind of name dropped him a little bit earlier, but Telly Smith's "Word Alive" with their album Monomania.
When help is all I need, why do I feel safe? 'Cause it's the only way.
This album was really good. There's like 80% of this album that I've put on my playlist at one point or another. And while like some of them kind of fall off the track, motherfuckers call me Mr. Blooming Your World in the goddamn Discord. Remember where that came from?
yeah, I kind of forget, like, what was the context of that?
I don't know, but
Because
nothing ever needs
we all
context anymore.
hated Burning Your World Down. And,
yeah.
and Justin was like,
Yeah,
I like
he was adamant on it, and so I think who was it? Who was it? It was Talon who changed Justin's name.
Whatever. Anarchy, democracy, whatever. One of those words. If it makes you guys feel any better, that's fallen off my list. But in terms of its tracks, my favorite tracks from this album are "Another Year in the Shadows" and "Comfort and Chaos." "Comfort and Chaos" is probably the like one of the songs that didn't make my top 5, but was probably like one of my most played songs this year, just because of like how many times it's like very much repeatable. It's got a really good instrumentation. Tally Smith has never sounded better, in my opinion. Like this is where he has shined the most. There's also a lot of good songs here, like "Searching for Glory." "No Way Out" gets surprisingly heavy, as well as fucking "Thank You."
Thank You is my favorite song on this album.
I wasn't expecting that to go as hard as it did, especially with the music video where they got the fans to help put in footage for that. I think the only thing that it doesn't put it any higher is what I gave Final Story crap for, was that there wasn't much variation in this album, and I would have liked just a touch more different sounding, maybe bringing a feature here and there to kind of break up Telly's vocals a little bit. But I'm not complaining. This album's great.
Yeah, that was my biggest grievance with it. I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. My favorite tracks were Monomania, No Way Out, and my favorite song by far is Numb Love, Misery 2. My biggest qualm with this album is that it feels like the Telly Smith Show. It feels like the instrumentals a lot of times take a backseat to Telly's vocals, and because the songs don't have a lot of variation between them at times, some of them kind of fade together, like you mentioned, that it feels a little bit overbearing. And not that I don't like Telly's vocals or anything like that, but it feels like I've got the same thing too many times in this album, and that's what kept it out of the top 10 for me. But again, there's only too much of a good thing can only be so bad. Like, I think this is still in my top 20 or 30. But yeah, no, overall a good pick. I think I could have predicted this one for you.
Yeah, it's probably one of the few you can probably predict on my list. But as a whole, this album is really good if you really like Telly's vocals. But if you want like a bit more variation, a bit more kind of a heavier sound, Violent Noise is definitely like the heavier of the albums they've put out in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
The few comments I want to make on this is that I have struggled to get into this band, where I'm only able to pick out a handful of songs by them that I actually like.
I'm the same way.
Where it's like I want to like them more than I actually do.
I just want to note, KF stands for Kyle Forever, which is the former vocalist of We Came as Romans.
That was very
good tribute to him.
Yeah.
Apart from that, that's all I got. So if you want to hit us up with your number 7, Derek.
Sure. Another album we didn't discuss on the podcast because that's where my list is at. Predicted by at least two of you. My number 7 album of the year is Manic by Halsey.
Die someday, someday, someday. When I burst into flames, I'll leave you there.
I think this is the only pop album on my top 10. Yeah. Okay. So there was a time where Justin Bieber's new album was in my top 10. So that would have been interesting to talk about on here. But this was one of the first albums I heard this year and checked it out out of curiosity, and I'm really glad I did. I can't think of any other album this year that impressed me as much on my first listen than this did. I heard the opener, Ashley, which also made me realize, I don't know, I think this took me longer than everybody else, but Halsey is just an anagram for her real name, Ashley, which I never knew and didn't pick up until then.
Today I learned.
Yeah, exactly. I listened to it in a car on a road trip, and I was absolutely mesmerized by what I was hearing. It wasn't like super deep by any means, because I can only expect so much from a pop record, right? But it had masterful production and lyrical depth in a way that I wasn't necessarily expecting from this album with the limited expectations I had prior to listening to it. Ashley and the closer, 929, are the best bookends for any album that I've ever heard. They open and close the album in a way that makes sense, and they both work well as standalone songs as well, to boot. Ashley transitions into Clementine, which is unfortunately my least favorite song off the album and the only one I don't have saved, which gave me mixed feelings on my first listen, but the rest of the album picks up and never drops in quality. Track 5, Forever's a Long Time, is one of the best executed pop songs I've ever heard, both in terms of production and lyricism, propped up by Halsey's delivery. I think I put lyrics here, yeah. Love built, God built provinces, built calluses, break promises, because I could never hold a perfect thing and not demolish it. What am I thinking? What does this mean? How could somebody ever love me? And there are interludes throughout the album, too, with various features. I think Alanis Morissette, BTS, and Dominic Fike. They work well as individual songs and as a way to space out the album into sections. I don't think those sections necessarily make sense, like in the way that they're clumped. I might just be missing something. But either way, they work well as interludes in the sense that they provide a breath of fresh air that make the 48-minute runtime of the album feel less than it actually is. Overall, this album, alongside the fact that after that disappointing album by Ariana Grande drops her out of my number 1 spot for favorite pop artist, has Halsey dethroning her. And Manic lands itself as one of my favorite pop records of all time, as well as obviously one of my favorites of this year. Big recommend, especially 3 a.m. I think is another standout track. It never really made it big on radio, but it's super catchy, really upbeat, just a fun listen. But I don't have too much more to say on it.
So does that take us to Jacob, your number 7 pick?
My number 7 pick is Alpha Wolf, A Quiet Place to Die.
Okay.
So
That brings us to Jake's number 6.
Is there anything you want to add about Alpha Wolf over here?
Yeah, like why is it in your number 7?
Well,
Bro.
Bro.
Done. Next.
All right, so Jake, you're number 6.
I mentioned that there was an album that punched above where it was and pushed Stand Atlantic back up.
Mm-hmm.
You could say this one rose to the top. It's The Rise by Discrepancies as my number 6
Ooh.
pick.
Don't get lost in the undertow. They tell you brush it off your shoulder, but it eats at your brain. Now it seems that the goal you were seeking is strange, so you're locked in the paradox. Seeking its change.
I take full responsibility.
You should.
for this one
You
being
totally
on
should.
your list.
You totally should. This band goes so hard. They're one of my favorite bands I discovered this year, that I was put onto this year. This is rap rock done right in every sense of the word. It opens up with Undertow, my favorite song on this album. And the opening lyric of it is, "We're on the rise, you should probably face it." And I think that's a nice tie into the album title. And it's a nice tie into what the entire album is going to be talking about. It's kind of like pushing back against everything that's trying to weigh you down. I mean, Undertow, you know what you're expecting out of a song named Undertow at this point.
Yeah.
But even in other songs, there's other songs that are like uplifting. Can You Feel It and All My Love, probably most notably, which are more positive, like, yo, you can go do this. I want to point out some lyrics from Undertow really quick. Where in one of the verses it says, "When you're coming from the bottom, then there's probably scars. For everybody that got a problem, acknowledge ours. We didn't follow your guidelines on how to be fraud, so I know watching from the sidelines gotta be hard." In general, the lyricism on this album is some of the best I've heard all year. Like, if we're rating album purely on a lyric scale, it's probably higher than number 6, for sure. There's so many incredible lyrics on every song, and like, if I could, I would mention like probably some lyric from like at least 8 of the 10 songs on this album. I just mentioned the one from Undertow. One of my favorite lines from the entire album comes on the second track, Control, where it says, "Ripping shows out on the road so they can see why we fly, but St. Louis will forever be my CITY." And I think that line there just shows the amount of talent that this band has when writing songs, because you're able to rhyme the word fly with spelling out letter by letter the name of your city. Like, I think that's so creative and so cool in a song. So you get cool moments like that, but then you also have the sad, more emotional elements, and I don't think that is any more clear than in 2 of the songs near the end of the album, in Crawling Back and Forever, which have really deep lyricism. From Crawling Back, I picked out the verse right before the final chorus where it says, "Sorry I broke your heart, that was never my intent. Just know I'd rather let you go than ever let you down again, because there's no one on this planet that could ever take your place. But growing up is understanding that your heart is going to break, and oftentimes the right decision is the hardest one to make."
Damn.
I'm just going to let that one sink in for a bit. Because the moment I internalized that one, I was like, God damn, bro. And then they just follow it up in Forever, the closing track on this album, and it gets even deeper, where it's talking about the relationship between, I can only assume, the vocalist and his grandfather who passed away, where it says, "You made sure I knew you loved me every time I would visit, but you were always on the go. I was always handling business. No way we can rewind that. No way we can get that time back. I'm just happy we had it. The good, bad, and the tragic, for real."
Oh,
And,
man.
like,
I interpreted it as the vocalist in, like, fast forward in his older age with his son, and then his son had passed away young. And so he's saying that he had wished that he had spent more time with his son and made that time after his son had, like, moved away, or that sort of thing. Or like his son died young before he came of age, and he was always on business trips or whatever, and they had a rough relationship, and now he'll never get the chance to mend it. But like you're saying, either way, incredibly
either way,
deep track.
yeah. And you get lyrics like that all throughout the album, but those are just personally some of my favorites. And I really think the lyrics are the best way to describe how incredible this album is. But I do also want to touch on instrumentally. This is some of the cleanest production and mixing on any album that I have heard this year. The drums, the guitars, everything sounds so crisp. And I think the best song to describe that would be Blame Me, which is probably the heaviest song on this album. But overall, I am in love with Discrepancies. I'm in love with The Rise as an album. And that's why it's my number 6 pick for my top 10 albums of 2020.
Great choice.
Justin, I don't know if you have anything to add on to it, but if not,
No,
we're gonna move on.
I knew when I found these guys that you would probably you'll like them a bit more than I would. They're a bit too focused on the rap vocals than I would like. I like that perfect blend that Never Tell and in some cases from Ashes to New have. But yeah, I can definitely see why you favor them heavily. So I have nothing bad to say against that pick.
Shout outs Put 'Em Up featuring Dubflow.
that song is a trip, bro.
And did we say fuck too much?
I like to rap over rock to bang the head. That's an iconic lyric right there.
Lyric of the year.
This was a surprise for me. I didn't really know much about this album before we were going to discuss it, or much about this artist rather. I can't say I'm super high on the album as a whole. Tracks like Forever definitely stick around in my mind as being very emotionally charged, and Put 'Em Up for just being fun.
Yeah.
But this, you were mentioning, Justin, that this is more like From Ashes to New or Never Tell. And I feel like the difference is that those like rap style vocals are more rock based, whereas these are more like rap based. They just happen to be on a rock song, I guess, sort of in the vein of like a Fire from the Gods sort of thing. Which, I mean, I understand. I really enjoy this album, though, especially having not heard of this artist before.
Justin, your number 6 pick.
Yeah, so my number 6 pick, spoilers for the rest of my list, is my favorite debut album for this year.
Okay.
It's actually an album that released yesterday. American Dream Machine's Dead Hearts.
Chances, so listen when I say the moment you know you wanna let go, I'll sweep you up in pieces.
Yes, this came out yesterday.
It came out yesterday.
Aren't we glad that we pushed this back a week, huh?
yeah, that's exactly why I was like saying, let's not do Friday.
Wow.
But
Talk
no.
about it.
Yeah, so this is my number 6, and I honestly feel like as a debut album, these guys absolutely show their sound. So for those that have never listened to this band, which is fine, they're a much smaller band. This is their debut album. They are more kind of the hard rock, with surprisingly, they go heavy in a couple of songs, which surprised me when I first listened to it. Like Back to Life, like toward the end, they pull out the heavier vocals, which I wasn't expecting, but fits the song rather than just being heavier vocals. Just put metalcore on on their name, but no, this is more kind of hard rock with a little bit of post-hardcore here and there. Instrumentally, it's definitely got the heavier guitar riffs. The lyricism is really good, especially for one of their songs, Trapped Under You, which is all about like being entranced and put under a spell by someone you're infatuated with. That's probably one of the songs like lyrically that I like. And these are also hometown Virginia. These guys are out of Gainesville.
Oh, okay.
So that's also how I figured out how I learned about them when we did a little bit of research on what bands are in the area. I found out these guys were there. So again, we'll listen, and there isn't a song I don't favor. I think the one or two songs that didn't make my playlist were like Tomorrow and Seraphim, just because I just need more time with them. And this album's only released yesterday, and still I'm still loving a lot of this album. It probably, maybe in the next couple of weeks, may drop a couple points lower on my list just because of recency bias. But honestly, with what I've already talked about, I stand by my choice and put it as my number 6.
I just want to add on that we were recording this episode on December 19th. So when Justin mentions yesterday, that's
December 18th.
To give the time frame on when this is all happening.
Literally yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have a time. I saw you tagged me, and I want to
Yeah.
get around to this, but I was way too busy trying to figure out my own top 10 to throw another album into the mix. I told myself I was done. I couldn't break my own rule.
Yeah, that's fair. I completely understand, but I made sure that before I submitted my full list, I gotta listen to this, and this was the one album that shook up my list the most, just because I couldn't figure out where the hell to place it.
Yeah.
And after I listened to it again before the podcast, I was like, yeah, this is the kind of music I definitely want to start listening to again. And these guys definitely did not miss it all. I feel like they've got the sound they want, and if they, I think the one thing that they just need to improve on is, getting their name out more, and honestly, just doing whatever.
I have nothing more to add.
No.
So
That's my number 6. So, Derek, what's yours?
We'll be able to breeze through mine because my number 6 is Wake Up Sunshine by All Time Low. And I feel like I got all of my feelings out on that earlier. So I am more than happy to move to Jacob's number 6.
My number 6 is Bill Murray's Iggy Pop.
I've got nothing but glass, broken glass. I know I got my head in the dark, eyes open, keep my light on my face.
This is on my list.
This is also on my list.
Jake, is it on your list?
Jake?
You can feel the heat intensify from the right side of the.
He's sitting there, he's sweating in his seat. He's like,
cheeks getting red, sweating under the armpits. Like,
yeah, and these weak arms are heavy.
all right. Well,
So, I guess I'll go first.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This album's short and sweet, and it's very diverse. You got features from Rory Rodriguez, John Mess, and Brody, and you got a song with a flute, a song with a saxophone, a song with the Taco Bell bell.
My favorite instrument.
Yeah. But when we were talking about like the track meanings in the November recap, you told me I seriously dislike other humans is about being it's about people who hold on to bitterness and grudges. And like in that moment when you said that, I was like, I'm doing this. I'm it's not something to be proud of, obviously.
Right.
I guess you could call it like post almond clarity.
My God.
Postal
Don't you mean
clarity.
postal mond clarity?
Postal
Yeah.
clarity.
But yeah, like I don't know. I've realized, and it's made this song and you saying that has made me realize that I was doing this, and normally I'm very easygoing, but this particular thing I realized I'm holding on to it, and I'm working on letting go. So.
Well, that's what music should do. I mean, it should
Yeah.
mean something to you, you know? Well, you're talking about song meanings, I just want to put it out there. 6 tracks on this album all have very deep meanings behind them. Post-almond clarity is, quote, eating almonds is known to increase your brain clarity. Just wanted to get the facts out there. So, which I feel like it is a good metaphor for how Bill Murray's music like acts in general. Like the whole shtick is that you're creating creative, quirky music that shouldn't make sense but does. With, I guess, outside of post-almond clarity, generally surprising deep and meaningful lyricism that's all titled strangely and without reason. This isn't any different, but I think it's the best example to date of how well it can work. This is both my favorite Bill Murray album and Bill Murray's favorite Bill Murray album.
And mine.
Exactly. Justin, is that your favorite Bill Murray album?
It is also my favorite.
Well, then I'm glad we're in consensus.
It is also my favorite Bill Murray album.
There we
Added
go.
context.
go.
I have never listened to another Bill Murray album, so
It's
it is
fine.
number
No,
one
no.
by default.
Details
No.
are unimportant. You mentioned the Taco Bell at the end of absolutely cranking my motherfucking hog. The pan flute breakdown. I seriously dislike other humans or most other humans. I think my favorite is the Macho Man Randy Savage clip overlaid by a text-to-speech rendition of Bill Murray and Fluoride in the Hard Seltzer Water.
That's
Speaking of, I guess I've listened to this about 20 to 25 times through, and that's my favorite album. I think the Rory and John Mess features are
Your
too
favorite
good to
song.
ignore. Yeah, my favorite song off the album. Sorry. Those features, especially the John Mess feature, is one of those things. It's another Bill Murray moment, I'll coin it, where it's like it shouldn't work, but it does. Speaking of postal Mond clarity, I mentioned earlier that like some of my favorite deliveries have come off my top 10 albums of the year, and I've got Nothing But Class, Broken Glass. I've got My Head in the Dark, Eyes Open is something that gets stuck in my head from that song. That delivery is again one of my favorite of the year. The short runtime that you mentioned, the 7 tracks, I think is what's holding it back from going any higher for me. And I think I also had Rich Sips as my number 6 album of last year, which was the Bill Murray album released last year. I don't think I can justify putting it any higher because it's only 7 tracks, but at the same time, it feels complete, even though it's only got 7 tracks on it. If that makes sense, like it feels like everything it should be. It doesn't feel like it's missing anything. I don't know how I could get any better from here, because if this, I think this is Bill Murray's magnum opus, and for my own sanity, I hope it is, because if it gets any better than this, then we're looking at top 3 or album of the year potential. And I don't know a world where a 7-track album hits my top 3, but by God, part of me hopes we don't get one, and the other part of me hopes we get one, because this is just so damn good.
Egg.
I got nothing else to add. You guys pretty much said what I already.
I'm glad it made at least 3. This is the first one that we've had like real overlap
Yeah,
in
really.
albums.
I don't think it'll be the last though.
It
No,
was
no, it will not be the last. We've got at least one more.
Egg. Should we move on? Are we moving on?
Yes, sir.
So we're on to our number 5 picks now, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're halfway through this.
Had only 2 hours?
No, we're actually once I add music in, we're probably at like 1 hour 38 minutes right now.
Oh,
So we're honestly not doing that bad right now.
if we keep sub 3, we're inhuman.
My number 5 pick is "The Death of Me" by Polaris. So I like to consider my top 10. There's 3 different categories. There's number 10 through number 6, and then there's Polaris sitting at number 5, and then there's my top 4.
You just have a spot for
Polaris
Polaris.
is in a spot of its own, in the sense that I checked the stats on this one. Okay, Last.fm has told me that 70% of the songs that I've played from this album come from me listening to Landmine, Pray for Rain, and Hypermania, and the other 30% makes up the other 7 tracks on this album, and that's why it falls in the middle here, because Hypermania, Pray for Rain, and Landmine are so fucking good that I could not include it in my top 5, but I can't put it any higher than this because everything else is just not as memorable as those 3 songs for me. Those 3 songs stuck with me throughout the entire year, and when the rest of the album doesn't hold up to that, it makes it seem a lot worse than it probably is in reality. Because I was think back on those 3 songs super high, and then it's like, oh, it's Creatures of Habit, whatever. Vagabond, whatever. And then I go and re-listen to the album, and like, they're all really good songs. It's just that Landmine, Pray for Rain, and Hypermania just stick out so much to me that I downplay everything else on this album. And throughout the year, I downplayed everything else on the album, and that's partially why I can't put it any higher on my list. But overall, fantastic metalcore album. There's a lot to like about this one. The only song that has never really stuck with me would be The Descent, which is the closer, which, if I remember correctly, I've only listened to like 2 or 3 times. But it has a very, very, very long fade out that I didn't really feel worked too well. But other than that, just a fantastic album. So that's about all I have to say on The Death of Me.
I think I guess Pray for Rain and Hypermania are 2 of my favorites, especially Pray for Rain. Obviously, we talked about the top 5 songs. Creatures of Habit, unlike what you mentioned, is probably my 3rd favorite, followed by Deep Cut of Martyr, Waves. I
solid song.
I really enjoyed that song more than I expected to. This was a song that benefited a lot, again, like from re-listens for me. I listened to it like maybe twice when it first came out, and nothing besides Pray for Rain and Creatures of Habit and Hypermania really stuck with me throughout the year. As we were wrapping up for figuring out top 10 albums, this is one that I had marked for revisit, and having revisited it, I enjoyed it a lot more than I did before. It ended up in my top 25, I think, but yeah, no, great pick. One of the better metalcore releases of the year, alongside some other star content. It was just a really great year for metalcore.
On that
I feel
note,
like
this is my favorite metalcore album of the year.
Okay.
If
Spoiler.
that says anything about my top 4, we'll get to that. Unless Jacob, if you have anything to add,
I was gonna say, this album isn't on my list. Spoiler alert. Because I like the first half of the album. I think the rest of the album is just to me.
Yeah, that's kind of where I sit as well. Because the first half of the album makes up most of the singles, which I think are all the strongest points, and then Pray for Rain. But yeah, I mean, it still made my number 5. So
Yeah. I don't have anything more to say.
Justin, it's your time, my friend.
It is my time. It is my time to break hearts and break lives.
No.
My
No.
number 5,
Not here.
Slaves to Better Days.
They say true love's blind. They tell me wait for a sign. It's time my head shakes over.
You're
All right, so
excommunicated.
we're the podcast stops here.
This is done. We hope everybody enjoyed.
This is a done deal. This is a done deal.
Look,
5?
If there's any reason for the podcast to end, I'm glad it's because of me. But no,
Psychopath. 5?
yes.
All right, tell me why. Your
All right,
top 4 better be this album 4 more times.
So the reason why it's my number 5, and I can't do it any higher. I mean, for good things, what else can I say that we haven't already said? This album's amazing. Matt saved this band when Johnny just dropped the ball hard in their UK tour. Matt, when Heavier came out, everyone didn't really know how Matt would fit with the rest of the band and with the songs. And then when each new single that came out, got better and better, everyone was more on board with Matt. And the singles kept coming. And the singles kept coming.
I see where this is going.
That's why I can't play so much higher. Because
That's understandable.
of a
actually.
13-track album, one of it being probably one of the better opener tracks that I've heard in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
Of a 13-track album, 7, or I think 6. Was it 6? Might have been 7. Either way, a high number of this album, good majority of this album, was singles. And all of them were great. All of them. Except the mix for Heavier. Not the correct mix. I deny this album mix to the end of days. To
Derek?
better days with this album, you might say.
Is now the time to bring up your playlist?
I literally had my snipping tool up on the playlist as you said that. It's in the Discord.
So Derek has a playlist called Old Heavier is Greater Than New Heavier, and it's the entirety of 2 Better Days, but with the original Heavier mix.
Yeah, for good reason, because it fits better with the album. And there's also just some really notable songs that were not singles. Cursed, Secrets, Footprints. I feel like this album would have done a lot more and gotten a lot higher on my list if there's a lot more surprises. If Wasting My Youth, Like I Do, and especially maybe not Talk to a Friend, but Eye Opener, if those were at least surprises, I feel like this album would have ranked much higher on my list. But because of that, I can't put it lower than my top 5 just because of how amazing it's produced and created, and how much just from the brink of not knowing what the hell Johnny was gonna do to creating just one of the better albums that in this band's history, and then in the next year going under a new name to finally continue on with that sound that they've found with this album. I feel like I can't possibly put it lower than 5, or else I'm pretty sure I would be kicked out of the podcast.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but with my negatives aside about how this album was marketed, go listen to this album. It's an amazing album. Just because there weren't much surprises, I didn't feel like there was a lot of reward on first listen, and because of that, that kind of knocked it down a few pegs for me. Whereas all the other albums that I have ranking higher on it, on first listen, I got them immediately, and the songs on those albums were saved. They weren't a lot of it was a surprise to me, and I feel like I remember those more because I listened to them in the context of the album.
So before we go any further, can anybody else discuss this album right now?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. Let's save the rest. This is all on our list,
Yeah.
right?
I
Yes.
want to say something that I found really interesting about the album first.
Yeah.
It's the opener to Better Days. If you go and look at the lyrics, it's a bunch of the songs on the album, like the lyrics mashed together. I didn't even know that till like 5 years
Oh, really?
ago. Yeah.
Oh, shit, really?
I
Oh,
just
that's
thought
part
it
of
was,
why I
like,
loved it so much.
Part of
Oh yeah,
theirs.
no, yeah, I noticed it on the first couple of lessons. I was like, yeah.
So I feel like instead of us talking about it now,
Let's talk about it in its proper territory.
Yeah,
It's
well,
more
I feel
deserving.
like-
that and also too that everybody, I feel like at this point, because it's on all of our lists, I would assume, right, that the reason we can't talk about it is because it's all in our top 3, right? Not that somebody didn't put on. If somebody didn't put it on their list, we need to sit down and have a talk.
The podcast would really end if it's not even in the
Yeah.
top 10.
But that
Who do
in
you
this
think it
case,
is?
everybody gets their own turn for when it inevitably comes up. I feel like.
Oh, don't worry. I think my top 3 is gonna be a lot worse for some people here.
Oh my good god!
It's gonna be great.
Well,
I'm
now that you've mentioned
excited.
this, I think I know what your album of the year is, and if what I think is your album of the year shows up any sooner, then I'm completely lost. But on that note, we'll go to my number 5, which I guess we can move to Jacob's number 5 because my number 5 was "Eggy Pocket" by Bill Murray.
Oh man,
Jacob.
I'm gonna get hate for this too. I'm gonna be like Justin was just a few minutes ago.
Yes.
For just from one person though.
Oh god, I know what this is. Fuck me.
The pain train is here.
My number 5 album of the year is Movement's No Left to Give. No
Okay.
Good Left to Give.
All right, I'm
That's
good.
not what I expected.
Don't give up your ghost. Tell me what you think about. 'Cause every single night I see you fight to keep it down.
That is what I expected.
So I this isn't the album that I thought it was, and it's honestly somehow worse.
Oh,
But-
that's awesome.
At the same time, I'm very happy it placed this high. So go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna get a little personal with this one.
Story time with Jacob. Let's begin.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Can I
not
get a
pleasant-
snack
it's-
first?
No.
Go
No,
for it.
it's
Go grab the
it's not a very pleasant.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said over and over again, lyrically, this album is amazing, and it came at the perfect time for me because in the middle of September, me and my girlfriend broke up, and
Oh, I didn't know
it
that.
it's okay. It kind of sent me into like a depressive spiral, and then this album came out like a week later, so saying it came at the perfect time is like an understatement for me. And around that time, I would be like up at night, mind racing, like thinking what I could do differently and what I could have done differently. And this album was there for me, and I would find myself falling asleep to it. And I find myself revisiting songs like 12 Weeks, which is essentially asking like if your former love's life or anyone who you feel you've wronged in the past would be better if you didn't exist. It's a very depressing song. But yeah. it's there, and it's helped me reflect on some things. Like I don't want to get too into detail, but
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
and then you get like Don't Give Up Your Ghost, which is about depression and suicidal thoughts, which I think is very important to bring up now, especially with COVID. And like just the other day I saw an article like 1 in 10 Canadians have contemplated suicide since the pandemic started, which is fucking insane to me.
Mm-hmm.
And but this song is basically saying, tell your loved ones you care about them. And I mean it. Go pause the podcast right now. Call your friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And tell them that you care. Because right now the world is very depressed, and there's a lot of mental health issues going around right now. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I've got a similar reason for liking this album as much as I did, and I'm really glad that you were able to connect with it on that level. That's part of what made it so special for me as well. But yeah, no, I think that's the beauty of this album, is that it gives people an outlet to escape into, who have dealt with that, even whether it's recent or in the past or whatever, that it does such a great job of drawing out those emotions. And I'm really glad that it was there as an outlet for you.
Lastly, I want to talk about the closer. Definitely like the best track lyrically, I'd say.
Mhm.
And not my favorite track, but it's about diving into emptiness you feel after a relationship has ended, taking blame for everything you did wrong, and realizing it was never meant to be. And I just want to end with lyrics from that song that really mean a lot to me. I lost my flame, and so I told you what you want. Talked my way into a place where I felt safer, I thought. I never meant to cause you any harm. I just wanted to speak it, so maybe I'd believe it.
Yeah.
Sorry for ruining the tone in here.
No, dude,
No, the
you're
tone
all
has
good.
been ruined since Justin put Swaves at this.
Yeah,
number 5.
exactly.
So, I think the timing is appropriate, in all honesty.
It's okay. Don't worry. I'm going to ruin the tone again later. We're all good. But yeah, no, great album. And this felt, I feel like it grew on you, I guess, based on your initial reaction. How? Go ahead.
I realized it sounds like Boston Manor.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way. Yeah, I'm really glad you enjoyed this album and that somebody else here enjoyed it as much as I did. That makes me happy.
Smile.
Now, Justin and Jake, you guys haven't listened to this yet, right?
Not yet.
Oh, please go do.
I intend
That's my contribution to it right now.
That's your plea.
Yeah. Right now, yeah.
So does that bring it back to me?
That brings it back to you for your number 4.
Go for it.
These are the albums that I'm going to be revisiting for years to come, probably. And I feel like it's probably pretty obvious what 3 of the 4 picks are. And I feel like this number 4 pick is going to throw you guys off a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's motherfucking Grandson's Death of an Optimist.
Really?
Longer. Tell me what I'm supposed to think when the bullets start to pour. I am about so great or good when you send me off to war. Does it dead on either side?
You know what? With what else released this year, I have a pretty good idea on what your top 3 is.
I still haven't listened to this album.
I think it's interesting. You said, with this, I think you guys are going to know what the other 3 are.
Well,
this was one of those 3?
Yes, exactly. That's what I mean. I feel like this is one of the 3 that is predictable to make the remaining 4.
So I know 1, and I'm completely lost on the other 2. But I'm curious to hear why this hit number 4.
I'm surprised you only know 1.
I'm surprised you only know 1.
I don't know any.
I've mind in shambles, really. we were on such a good note, and then Justin just ruined everything. Really,
Yeah, exactly.
Why are you gonna bring up so me?
Well, you shouldn't have put it at number 5.
Maybe you shouldn't have killed the optimist in me.
Exactly.
So let me get started with this album. I feel like this album, in terms of the creative direction of this album, might be my favorite album of the entire year. The idea of this album being around G and X, where G is Grandson, the optimist, the one that's hopeful, that's pushing for change, that we can make change. We are the generation to make change in the world. And then you have X, which is the depressive side, the side that's telling you it's not worth it, it's not going to happen, you're wasting your time, etc., etc. And the way that he is able to bounce that concept throughout the album from song to song is just incredible. You get calls to it lyrically in almost every single song, and the narrative of the album is consistent throughout. You have Death of an Optimist to open it, which is a slow opener track. It's more of an opening than an actual song, in my opinion, but I feel like it sets the tone perfectly for what this album is going to be. I do wish it transitioned better into In Over My Head, but that's just kind of more of a nitpick thing. But every song on this album is absolutely incredible. Even the ones that I'm more underwhelmed by, in the vein of Welcome to Paradise and Pain Shopping, are still both incredible and have their moments. But really, this album has been a long time coming for me. Ever since A Modern Tragedy Volume 1, Grandson has been putting out some of my favorite music, just in music in general. I mean, hell, 2 songs from A Modern Tragedy Volume 2 were in my top 3 songs of last year. I absolutely adore Grandson. And for a debut album, this hits every note that I could have wanted it to, pretty much. And while it doesn't contain my favorite material, I mean, it's hard to top Stigmata and Darkside, which are just two of my top 3 favorite songs last year. That's hard to top in any sense. But this album is a perfect follow-up to the Modern Tragedy series. It's perfect for 2020 in general, Death of an Optimist. If there's ever a year for Death of an Optimist to come out, it would be this year, I feel like. If there's any year to kill your optimistic spirit, it would be 2020. From COVID to the protests to the presidential election, it just doesn't end. And I think everything about this album is just fantastic. I want to touch on some of the lyricism now that I've kind of said more general, broad things about it. Where you get at the beginning of the album, Left Behind, where the chorus, it's nothing crazy, but it says, I want to lead a generation, but the train's about to leave the station. I don't want to move on, but I don't want to get left behind. And I think that, especially for earlier in the album, sets up the direction that the album is going to be heading in. You get Identity early on in the album as well, which is my favorite song on this album. So you start out Death of an Optimist, where you start out more positive with In Over My Head, Left Behind, even Identity to some sense, where it's like you're trying to find your identity. Like, you haven't lost it entirely, but you're looking for your identity. And then you hit one of my favorite tracks on this entire album, and maybe my favorite interlude of all time, in The Ballad of G and X. I mean, as I said, it's one of my favorite interludes of all time. I had low expectations and was blown away, and of the non-singles, might be the most memorable song on this album for me. And saying that for an interlude, I know you said in the vein that Pretty Venom from All Time Low, Derek, is your favorite song from that album. I think The Ballad of G and X is my Pretty Venom, where that song is just incredible. And I think, really, I mean, in the name, The Ballad of G and X, it's the entire creative direction of this album. From line to line, tossing between G and X, where it's, I talk to X, he tells me that he's always watching. He put actually, no, that's from the chorus or whatever. This is just part of the verse where it says, I talk to X, he tells me that he's always watching. He put a hex up on my soul to keep me locked in. I keep looking at the world like I'm an optimist. He says we can't go back, there ain't no way of stopping this. And, I mean, just every single line in that song is like role reversal of G and X, of the optimist and the death of the optimist. And then you go into We Did It, where you pound home that idea even harder of we did it, we didn't. Where it's like the rich get richer and the sick get sicker. And then outside of The Ballad of G and X, we get into probably my favorite non-single, In World War III, which showcases this Grandson's got bars. He isn't just in it for like the rock and electronic hybrid stuff. Dude can rap, and that is evidenced by World War III in its entirety. I have a lyric here where it says, We at war, we don't know what for. They made up a reason behind closed doors. At the end of the season, we leave, make an enemy bleed, hit the seashore with the C4. I think that's an incredible... There's so many incredible lines in World War III. One of my favorite songs that I have not given enough listen time to. And then you get to the end of the album with Drop Dead and Welcome to Paradise. And what a note to end the album on. I think Drop Dead is a fantastic song to close the album out. And then Welcome to Paradise, a song that I've not given nearly enough attention to, but incredible lyrically. And it wraps the album together in its entirety. And if you can't tell, I fucking love this album.
Which is why I'm surprised it's not in your top 3. Especially from an artist you care
I have
so
been
much
debating
for.
this number 4 and number 3 pick all week. But I think the reason that I have it at my number 4 has more to do with my number 3 pick than this album. And I'm going to leave it at that until we get to my number 3.
Okay. Yeah, I enjoyed this album a surprising amount, too. Identity, obviously the standout, one of my favorite songs this year. As well as Left Behind, Dirty, and I'm missing another one, which is embarrassing because I want to describe it as one of my favorite songs off the album. But that's like 4 more Grandson songs than I've ever enjoyed. It was very nice to me for an artist that I found when he was first coming out, listened to for a while, and then just dropped and never really enjoyed again. That to have material that I'm listening to this album and don't actively dislike any of the songs was a massive step up. I think it landed itself in 35th or something like that for my albums, which again, out of 295, considering it's an album I didn't care, or an artist I didn't care much for beforehand, as a testament to how good this album is. I think you've covered literally everything that could ever be covered about this album. So I can't add anything, but yeah, no. This is no surprise to me that it's in your top 10. I'm just a little more surprised about where it ended up. So I'm very curious.
It'll make sense in a moment when we get to my number 3.
I have ideas, but I'll hold them.
I got nothing else to add. I have said pretty much anything that I can. I do almost wish that I had more time with this album because it did only come out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, fantastic album. Grandson Death of an Optimist. I can't wait to hear this shit live. Actually, before we move on, he had Death of an Optimist, the movie, which was a live or a virtual performance that he did of the album, not in whole, but most of the album, bar a couple of songs. And that made this whole debate of number 3 and number 4 even more difficult because the album grew on me a significant amount just from that performance alone. But my gut's telling me that it deserves to be at number 4. So
that's fair.
I'm trusting the gut here.
Justin.
Yeah.
You're number 4.
And number 4 was Bill Murray's Aggie Pocket. And we've already hit on that pretty much everything I wanted to say. So
all right, well then we're gonna move right along because my number 4 was Pink Elephant by Stand Atlantic.
All right, Jacob.
Okay. My number 4 is Dance Gavin Dance Afterburner.
I just need to be alone. Why do people stare? Are they noticing you're there? Swabbing for my cloud.
How many tears are you crying, Derek?
Just a few. This 4 into 5 combo is really messing with me right now. But I'm gonna keep my mouth shut and let it go.
So this is probably their most well-rounded album in my opinion. Like you get the most consistently good, I'd say.
Yep.
And after listening to it for months, I went and looked at the lyrics again, and I realized it's actually about a breakup as well. So
yeah.
But unlike Movements, I'm not as emotionally attached to this album.
Yeah, it's not going to tear your heart out when you listen to it.
Yeah. But this album's fun. And I feel like the level of experimentation on this album compared to previous Dance Gavin Dance albums is much higher. You get songs like I'm gonna butcher this name. Caliento Globo.
Caliento Globo? Where's the second O?
Calatamiento.
We're gonna take it. We're gonna take it. We'll take it. We'll go.
Whatever. I don't. We learned French in school, not Spanish. So.
All right, Canadian.
But yeah, you get Tillian singing in Spanish, and then you have Will Swan singing some songs, and then you get John Mess going off and Say Hi.
So, real quick, are you reading my notes right now, or like, is this? Did you?
I'm
did
reading
you
my notes.
Did you steal my notes? Is that what's going on here?
Hey, this is how I felt when you were talking about Alpha. Okay.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine. I'll let it slide.
Yeah, I'm gonna read some lyrics from. Well, actually, I want to say John's lyrics often get overlooked because they're usually a bunch of
Nonsensical.
Nonsense. But then you get in like Strawberries Wake, he's like, I want you to matter to you, forget those backstabbers. And it actually means something for once.
Yeah,
John.
for once.
Even in Say Hi, like, you're just in denial and with the wrong one. Love don't make you crippled or enslaved. You're just in denial. Yeah, it's. I don't. Maybe I haven't paid attention to the lyrics of other Dance Gavin. Actually, I have. I'm lying. Yeah, this is the one where John is actually making sense for the most part.
It's not the first time, but I think it's a lot more noticeable on this album compared to others.
And consistent, I'd say.
Yeah.
And fucking Andrew Wells.
Andrew Wells.
Andrew
What
Wells.
more needs to be said?
Andrew Wells.
Andrew
he sounds
Wells.
better than both Tillian and John.
Reminder that he has his own band, Idola, that is scheduled to drop their album next year. So be on the lookout for that.
I'm gonna read his part in Nothing Shameful.
Please.
So take me for granted. I know I never really meant that much to you. All our memories will be erased. The only way out is forward. As far away as I can get. Where to now? What happened to my fucking purpose? I'm just a stone sinking, broken and numb. Where to now? The way you made me worthless. Truth is, in the end, we all end up alone. And can you feel me calling your name from the balcony seats you left empty? Can you feel me tearing apart everything we used to be? And
Beautiful.
Exactly. Literally every time I hear this song, I crank up the volume when his part comes on. I'm not even kidding.
Yep.
Like,
I do the exact same thing.
It's so good. And I went back and compared it to Evaporate last night because I was like, I did like Evaporate, but
This is better. This is better.
Well, I like that he's all over the song in Evaporate, but I think this by itself is better.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, especially with that lead up into Tillian's last chorus there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, great song.
That's all I have.
I'm glad somebody else enjoyed this album. That's it's the same vein as Movements that I'm sad it didn't place higher, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it enough to put both albums in your top 5. Now, Jake.
So this brings us to the top 3, doesn't it?
This does bring us to the top 3.
We're back to me quite quick, aren't we, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So, top 3. This is the real cream of the crop for 2020. And I just want to
Is this where Bill Murray is?
No.
Yeah,
Bill,
wait.
Bill Murray's like, I listened to 56 albums this year. Bill Murray's probably in like 30 something. I don't know. My number 3 pick. This is gonna clear the air a little bit.
Okay.
It's Future Palace's Escape.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Whoops.
Oh.
now I feel real dumb for forgetting this one in your top 3.
This album has left a lasting impact on me more than any other album this year. Even more than my number 1 and number 2. But I cannot reasonably put it any higher than number 3. I don't think I listened to any album on first day this year more than how much I listened to this album on the day it released back in September. And it's just incredible all around. The weakest songs on this album were 2 of the singles, in my opinion, in Ghost Chapter and Maybe. And that left 5 incredible tracks for me to listen to when the album came out. But really, what solidifies this album as my number 3 album of the year is the closing 2 tracks of Break Free into My Air, which, when I say that this album has left a lasting impact on me more than any other album this year, it is Break Free and My Air single-handedly leaving that impact on me. The idea of this album is, the name of the album is Escape. And a lot of this album is, I mean, it's this stereotypical depression, anxiety kind of stuff. But Break Free culminates everything about this album in a way that I don't know if any other song has ever done for me. Where I have some lyrics here. Unfortunately, there are still no official lyrics to the new songs from this album, and I am still upset about it. I don't think I'm ever going to get them at this point. But Break Free has this line right before the chorus where it says, "I'm better off alone in this cage built by fear, no matter how I've grown. Because today I'm still too afraid." And then at the end of the chorus it says, "It's time to fly and never hit the ground." And the way that ties into the entire meaning of this album of escape, and the fact that this album art is a bird cage with an open door, this song ties together the entire album like I don't think any other single song has ever done for me. And not to mention, it hits so close to home for me. That line of "I'm better off alone in this cage built by fear, no matter how I've grown," is something that I feel so personal, where my anxiety has gotten leaps and bounds better than where it was 3 years ago in high school. But I still feel restricted by it in many ways. That line just sums it up perfectly for me. And then I still haven't even gotten to My Air, which I don't think is as special as Break Free. But what a beautiful note to end the album on. I mean, there's a stripped version of Maybe After, but I'm just going to forget that exists for the moment. Because My Air is like the official closer to the album. Where it says, "Let me come closer and breathe you in. I am your water, you are my air. I am your water," where it's like, yourself, you are the one that is dragging someone else down, but on the other end, they are the one that's helping you out the most. And I think that everything from these last 2 songs ties together into the escape theme so well. I do want to give mention to some of the other songs, though, as much as those 2 have given me the most lasting impact. Songs like Lately and Parted Ways are both incredible. Parted Ways, her voice is angelic in that song. It's so incredibly beautiful, especially the hey there piece in the first verse just blew me away on first listen. And then Lately is fun and catchy and also depressing at the same time, and I am in love with this album. I could go on. There's so much more I could say about it. Anomaly is another fantastic song with an incredible chorus. Same with Parted Ways, as I've already briefly mentioned. But yeah, I don't know if there's too much more I can say about this album that I haven't already said. Break Free and My Air those 2 songs have done so much for me this year. I have collectively listened to those 2 songs over 100 times.
Damn.
So yeah, that's all I have to say.
The fact that this, I mean, I can't add anything to that. You've encompassed everything, but again, like the fact that this is a debut album,
it's unreal. It is unreal.
It's unreal.
It's a true testament that Grandson is one of my top 3 favorite artists of all time. He released his debut album this year, and it's not my favorite debut album of 2020. I think that's a testament to how close to home this Future Palace album hit to me. I want to move on from this point. Justin, your number 3 pick.
Can we just not?
What do you mean?
It's Slaves, isn't it?
So
It's Slaves again.
It's Slaves again. No, so I'm gonna preface this with their previous material and why I think they're my 3rd highest album. Self-Deception's Shapes.
Tell me that you're not worth fighting for. I've been to hell and back for you. Whatever you do, I'll still stay yours. I'll go back to
Interesting.
So, This album has the highest energy of any of my top 10 albums I've put on my list. It has the it's got that. It is the bare definition of hard rock, and a lot of what does it for me is not even the instrumentals. Kind of looking back, it's a lot of the vocals. They do a lot of really good things with the vocalist, especially in the song that Jake, I'm sure you like the most, "Smoke You Out."
Actually, that's my second favorite behind TikTok.
Second favorite. Oh yeah, TikTok. That's right. "Smoke You Out," where it flips back and forth between that, like the heavier kind of grungy sound, and then the lighter sound, and I love that. But that's not even my favorite. My favorite is tracks where they kind of go slower and then ramp up, like "Hell and Back," "Will This Be the End," the blues, and where it's that kind of not really anthemic, but it's a slow build. The lyrics don't really tell a story, but it's the meanings behind each of the lyrics, where a lot of the tracks are about being with this person, following them through and through into hell and back, and then something happening and getting that gloom, that shade of dark wash over you. So then you want to burn them to the ground and bury yourself alive. A lot of that, that's kind of why I feel like this album ranks far higher than what I think, on my list, because it probably tells, of one of the more higher energy artists I've listened to and put on this list, it tells the best story. The first track being the beginning of the end, and the closing track being "Will This Be the End?" And the entire album itself kind of fitting that line, it defining itself as an album rather than a collection of tracks, while also fitting my taste of that kind of hard rock, kind of grungy vocalist, with like a lighter sound and kind of the build up. That's why this is my third favorite album this year.
I've listened to this album a lot, because I discovered them, put them onto you, and you were able to say so much more about it than I am. Like, even though I've listened to this album a lot, TikTok and "Smoke You Out" I've played a lot. "Shade of Dark" even I've played a fair few times. But I never really pieced this album together in the way that you have, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. I also went back and listened to their self-titled album, just to see if I was overthinking this band, and know that they've got just a really good sound going back to their self-titled, which is, as a self-titled, you want it to be your defining sound, and they defined it with their previous album, and this is just that escalation of that sound, and there is not a bad track on this album to me. If I had to say one negative thing, I feel like there could have been a little bit more variance with the instrumentals, maybe just a straight slower track, which honestly you could count Shade of Dark or the beginning of the end as kind of slow, and then with the build up of the other tracks. But I feel like that is the one thing that's kind of setting apart from my top two, but my top two also mean a lot more in other ways, so we'll get to those when we get to those, but that's why it's on my top three.
I have nothing else to add.
I'm ready for Derek to disown me.
Nope. I for the sake of time and for the sake of your positive thoughts about this album, I'm gonna leave my thoughts to myself. On that note, we gotta move on.
Yep.
Okay. My number 3 album of the year is "No Good Left to Give" by Movements. I'm gonna make a bold claim that despite this being number 3 on my list, this is probably the best album in my top 10. Like, for all intents and purposes, despite this being number 3, I'm labeling this album honorary album of the year. They were my favorite band that I discovered all year, and this album alone is what earned them that title. I mentioned earlier with like Halsey that Manic, her album, was the album I've been most impressed with upon first listen. This was very similar in the sense that I had no prior exposure to this band, and this was the most impressed upon first listen that I'd been with the band since I'd heard I'd Rather See Your Star Explode by Slaves back in like early 2018. Short and simple, this album is pure art. It is love and loss, hope and hopelessness, joy and melancholy, and like all 5 stages of grief wrapped into one beautiful 12-song, 43-minute package. It details like the highs of a relationship and the subsequent pain of that relationship failing, and like that lost love drifting away from you and moving on to someone else while you're left like grieving and helpless. Like Jacob, it's a topic that's close to me, and it's something that I dealt with a few years back that had an extremely profound impact on my mental health, and I think that's part of why I love it so much and why it means so much to me. Because even at this point, if I've moved on from that person and healed from that loss, that memory of that pain never really leaves you. And this album drags that memory to the forefront of your mind in the best way possible, I guess. You could describe it as like hurts so good, I guess it'd be a way to put it, that it's painful in the best possible way. Jake mentioned it. Yeah, it's therapeutic. Jacob mentioned it, but the lyricism on this album is phenomenal. It feels less like lyricism at times and more in the vein of like poetry. The raw delivery on that lyricism adds to its impact. It's not my personal favorite delivery on here. It's not the deepest lyric on the album, but their lead singer, Patrick Miranda, delivers. It's in My Blood. The opener. It's still can't get up, stuck in the ceiling. I feel so fucked. At least I'm feeling. Before the second chorus, there's 2 different deliveries of that in the song, and both have different ways that they make you feel. But specifically, the one before the second chorus is one of the most emotional things I've heard all year. I don't want to sell the instrumentation short either, because it's nothing groundbreaking in terms of instrumentation, but the drumming, especially, you mentioned with Picturesque, you were a drum guy, right? Like this, I was a drum guy on this album because I felt like each instrument, in particular the drums, flow really well alongside the vocals. They give extra impact and feeling and emotion to the lyricism and the delivery by Patrick Miranda. This is the vinyl album, I guess, I played most this year as well, and it's going to go down as one of my favorite of all time, and one that means more to me than most other albums I've listened to. I don't think I've ever really personally connected with an album as much as I have this one, as well as just enjoying the song. I feel like I get a different experience listening to this album front to back as I do listening to those specific songs, each in their own individual way, that I feel like on their own I can listen to those songs in my car and feel like I'm vibing to them, and like they're, for lack of a better word, bops, right? That I can just sit in my car and listen to, and I really enjoy listening to them. And then I listen to the album as a whole, and I'm like, all right, well, it's time to cry, I guess. Like, it's, I guess I wrote down here that even if you've never felt what this album is trying to convey, by the time all is said and done, you'll cry for and miss a love you've never felt the pain of losing.
That's deep.
This album has a way of getting to you listening to it, that you will feel something regardless of your own personal experiences on the subject matter.
That's the name of their first album.
Really? I have yet to visit it. I have absolutely no idea.
Pretty sure it's called Feel Something.
I think you're right. Man, I'm so good. It's incredible. But yeah, no, this is probably the easiest recommendation I have on here, just because it's an easy listening sort of album. There's nothing here outside of maybe Tunnel Vision that drifts into the realm of being too much for the average person to handle. And yeah, I don't know. I really, really love this album. And the other 2 ahead of it, I have on there for separate reasons, I guess. So that's why I'm giving this honorary album of the year, because I feel like this is the one that did what music was supposed to do the most, in a sense that I felt like I could directly relate to and connect with this music. It just was outshadowed by two others for separate reasons. But that's all I've got to say on that. So I think we're good to move on to Jacob's number 3.
My number 3 is Currents, The Way It Ends.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
See, I was wondering why you weren't mentioning it. And I was like, did this really not make your top 10? And I was like, okay, this makes
You
more
guys
sense.
thought I went soft.
Oh, man. Okay.
We've been played.
There's still
We've been
hope.
played.
Yeah, dude, you know how I said about, you were saying everything I thought about Alpha Wolf? You were saying everything I thought about Currents even more. Holy.
I'm glad we're on that same wavelength.
I literally have notes about, what's the opening track? Never There. And, not the same part of it, but I was saying, it opens like the beginning of the Death of Me by Polaris, like where it's just vocals and, well, in this album it's a piano, and it really sets the tone, dark and depressing. I like the callback to their previous album and at the end, and I'll read it out. Because the place I feel safest, I was never there at all.
Oh, yeah.
The title of their first album is called "The Place I Feel Safest."
Yeah.
Now I said I haven't gone soft, but Currents has gone soft.
In a good way, though.
Yeah. I think it's because Brian, the vocalist's range has expanded a lot from the I Let the Devil In EP. It's his range is like you get songs like Poverty of Self where he's brutally slamming.
Yeah.
And then you get like the chorus of Better Days, which is fucking incredible.
Yeah.
Best song on the album.
Definitely the best song on the album.
Mm-hmm. Glad we're all in agreement.
What about you, Justin?
Have you even heard this album?
I don't know. But
So
it's that and movements is what I have been meaning to get to. But with time not being on my side these last couple of months,
right,
I kind of had to stick to what I've already listened to.
But yeah, I think this album really explores Brian's range, and I think that's why I love it, because it's so good, and it's all just one dude.
Yeah, it's
Dude's
crazy.
incredibly talented.
You'd never guess it if you didn't know, because I didn't know. I would have.
Yeah,
thought
I didn't know either. I thought it was two different people at first.
And in Better Days, I love the part where at the end, where it's him screaming as well as I think it's the chorus going in the background, right?
What do you mean? Oh, in the background?
The vocals overlap. Is what I mean. It's two. It's the same. It's Brian singing and screaming both of them, but they're happening at the same time, basically.
Yeah, overlapping.
Overlapping.
Yeah,
the word. I love that when bands do that in music. It's, I don't know why. I don't even know what that technique is called, but it's really good. And can't wait to see this band live again.
Yeah, they're one that wasn't on my radar at all, really, because I wasn't super impressed with that EP from 2018. And then now they're like a band that I'm like, I need to see them live, like right now.
They're really good live.
Come visit me in CT.
Facts.
It'd be fun.
That's all I have to say.
Does that bring us to number 2?
I think it does.
Already, Jesus.
Already, we're 2.5 hours into this.
Doesn't feel like it.
Justin wants to stay here longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Torture him more for his bad opinion on
slaves.
So in saying this number 2 pick, I think that's going to reveal my number 1 pick as well.
Okay.
I feel like that might go for all of us at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it is.
No.
Well, I think once I said my number 4, I think everybody knew what my top 3 were, but we'll see. We'll see. Hit me
I
with
like
your
it.
number 2.
I like to surprise people, so go ahead.
My number 2 pick is Manifest by Amaranth.
Nice.
Why did I forget about this?
I was wondering why
I
you
know.
Yeah, I forgot about it too, to be honest.
I like
But
You
now
listened
that
to
I
him at
hear
the
it, it's like,
same
yep.
time.
Sheesh.
like this is my favorite band. This is the band that put me onto rock and metal as a genre. If
This
like,
is also
when
the band
I
that put me onto rock and
when
metal?
I found Amaranth in 2016, I didn't even know that metal was a genre of music.
Oh.
So yeah, Amaranth has a very special place in my heart because of that, and they made my favorite album of 2018 in Helix, and Manifest is just barely a step behind that. It does everything in the Amaranth formula that I want out of an Amaranth album, but it takes a few liberties in the sense of one song in particular by the name of Boom! !1.
Yes, sir.
And then you also get the typical ballad of Crystalline, and then you get just a bunch of the other amazing, just generic Amaranth sounding tracks throughout the rest of the album. I do think that Helix is just a hint above Manifest for me, where I feel like there are a couple more songs on this album that are a little more underwhelming than Helix, whereas Helix, I think, really only had one underwhelming song for me in Unified. This album, I feel like Adrenaline and The Game were both a little bit more underwhelming. But bar those 2 songs, the other 10 songs on this album are absolutely incredible. Fearless, the moment that riff on Fearless opened up the album, I knew I was in for a treat. I knew I was in for a top 3 album of 2020 when that went through. And then by the end of the album, I believe we get the streak of Archangel into Boom, which are the 2 best songs on this album, bar none. And
Agreed.
maybe just one of the 2 best songs back to back just I have ever heard. I mean, I was talking about My Air, or Break Free into My Air, but Archangel into Boom is absolutely incredible in about 7 different ways. Yeah, they're my favorite band for a reason. It should be no surprise that they're up this high for me. Archangel was one breakdown away from being my favorite song of the entire year. It placed just out of the top 5 because it built up to a breakdown that never happened. But that song has one of my favorite Amaranth choruses. It has some Elise and Nils' vocals shine as always. And same with Henrik. His growls are insane. And speaking of Henrik, him on Boom, he is fucking unreal. Like, that is a song that it is hard to describe what Boom is in words without saying just go listen to it.
Boom.
Boom.
I mean, yeah, I guess that works, but I feel like you're underselling it a little bit by just saying boom.
Yeah. You need to hear the song if you haven't.
The dude can rap growl at inhuman speeds, and it sounds amazing. And then the fucking breakdown in Boom, my god.
It goes boom.
It does go boom. And then
One could say.
Yeah, and then that little clip where it's like, where he's like, hey, let me try this, and then she lets out a bleh.
Yeah.
Just insane. Like, it was one of the most fun songs to hear on first listen this entire year. But then, like, even outside of those, if we're talking about like some of the other deep cuts that aren't as notable on the album, you have songs like Die and Wake Up right at the end of the album, which are incredibly catchy. And then you have songs like Make It Better and Scream My Name, which are very uplifting and positive. Also pretty catchy, especially in the name of Make It Better. Yeah, I am in love with Manifest. I'm in love with Amaranth as per usual. That has not changed since I found them 4 years ago.
Right.
And I cannot wait to see this band live. I should have been hearing a lot of these songs live back in August, but unfortunately the world was not so nice. So
yeah, it sucks.
I think that's about all I have to say on Amaranth. I love this album.
Yeah, it's a little too amaranthy for me. In the sense that we mentioned this back when we did our initial review of it, but I wish it had a little bit more experimentation to it because it's literally the same formula over and over again, which it's good, don't get me wrong, but I had very high expectations for this album, and I got a very good Amaranth album, but I wanted a very good Amaranth album with some experimentation, and outside of Boom, I don't think this really delivered that as much. But that said, I mean, yeah, still great album. Amaranth can't really miss, you know. So I now that you say that and like hearing your top three, I feel like I should have known what the three were, and I just completely forgot about Future Palace and Amaranth. So.
That would be Justin. Let's move on to you.
Yeah. So I was wondering if anyone would guess this, but my number 2 is Point North's Brand New Vision.
Oh wow.
All right, you really liked this.
Yeah,
I knew you liked this. I didn't know you were this high on it. I thought you had just missed your top 10.
So yeah, when it got mentioned earlier, I
didn't say a word.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I remember thinking in passing, like, well, I thought Justin was higher on this, and then I just like forgot about it. I just assumed that like you would like, oh yeah, I heard too much that went into something else, and yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, this is my number 2. And a lot of the reason why this is my number 2 on my list is because of the lyricism. A lot of these lyrics and a lot of these songs are really, really good. I'm going to point out a few right after I get into what my favorites from this album were. But man, there's so much good in this album. For being Point North formed in 2017, and they really shined in this. I know they had an EP of sorts, I guess. It was a 6-track album with 4 acoustics, so it's kind of an EP, kind of an album. But this is really where their sound is defined. And, they have incredible songs. Lethal, Apolog, Nothing Left to Lose, Personal, No One's Listening, which, has a more mainstream reason why for existing more than just for the fact that it's a good song lyrically. And every time I listen to No One's Listening, I always hear the dog barks from the music video because I think they actually put that in as well. I keep thinking I hear them, but at the same time, I keep trying to tell myself they're not actually there, and that's just from the music video. But still, there's a lot of good from this album. One of my favorite lyrics is from Lethal. The chorus, get up, get out, I'll drag you down with me below the ground. So just save yourself. I'm lethal, no good for other people, because everything that I know seems to always let go. I'm on the fast track to never win my life back. You know how fatal poison is to the bone, so go get your life back. A lot of that song in general is just talking about, it's, a person who is literal poison in themselves, that they're kind of destroying not only themselves but anyone around them. And it's kind of that call out to be like, I have this toxic personality, you should get away from me. And while I don't relate to that on a personal level, I know a lot of people who struggle with that kind of mentality. So a lot of this song kind of hits closer to home than it really should. But hey, it works. And then another one, let me see if I can find that real quick. Personal. Fix this fracture in my bones, broken but never a weakness. Under pressure, it still broke, and I don't think I can relieve it. They did really well with the lyricism. And I think the one thing that sets this apart from my number 1 is the title track and the closer. I didn't really feel as highly on as the rest of the album, but everything else in between, the Kellen Quinn feature, Million Pieces, and Heartbeat, while they're still not high up on my list of songs that I constantly turn in this album, they are phenomenal. And I can't say anything else other than, that's the reason why this is my second favorite album of this year.
Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on Personal there, because I don't think that's a song that I brought up earlier. But that's another one of my favorites from this album.
Yeah, same here.
So.
There's a lot of good on this album. It's also that perfect size too. It's not too big. It's not too small. Mm-hmm. It's kind of just that perfect size. Where
it's a very digestible album. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's all I got. Unless you guys have any comments.
I don't have too much more to say since I already mentioned it when I said it as my number 10 pick.
So I think it's interesting that, well, I guess depending on what Jacob picks, this is number 2. But by the time that we're all said and done with our number 2s, I feel like we'll all be able to identify our number 1s. Because I know I've got Jake's and I know I've got Justin's. And I think mine's going to be pretty easy to figure out here too. My number 2 album of the year is To Better Days by Slaves.
That you're telling me lies. You can act like nothing's wrong in a place you don't belong.
I forgot the rules for this, and I assumed that we would all talk about it together. So my only notes are: I know how I feel about this, and so does everyone else. Moving on. So we're gonna wing it here and hope I can stay on target. I have a 1 to 10 point scale for rating different parts of albums that ultimately culminates to out of 60 points. So 60 out of 60 would be like a 10 out of 10. To Better Days, the song, is the only opener that I gave a full 10 on 10 this year. Mentioned earlier, but it's my favorite opener I heard all year and possibly ever. The way that it incorporates the different lyrics from different songs together into one cohesive package that also manages to transition so well into prayers really sets it apart as a great note to start the album on. I don't think that there's a single bad song on this album, or a song rather that I don't go back and visit very often, which is surprisingly not the case for my number 1. Matt, like we mentioned earlier, saved this band in sort of not a freak accident, I guess wouldn't be the way to put it, but something, the way that all came together with him filling in for them is sort of a happen by chance sort of thing. And to see how well they've managed to take that, what was supposed to be just a temporary fill-in position, and turn it into one of the best records that all of us have heard all year is truly a testament to how talented not only Matt, but how everybody else in this band is, because I feel like they've really found their sound. The only grievances I had really with this album were the new mix on Heavier, which I prefer the old one, but the new one I've grown to at least be okay with it. And then also that ending to Secrets, which again was something that grew on me within a matter of like 5 listens or whatever. It was a little jarring on first listen. And I mentioned with Movements that it was my honorary album of the year because the other 2 I like for different reasons. This to me was something that I had been anticipating for so long and enjoyed so much and revisited so often that I feel like it had any right going anywhere but here. Just because, even with some of the songs, I know I was a heretic for not putting it in my top 10 songs, but Talk to a Friend and the way that's very relatable. And there's like lyricism in something like Witch Hunt, where it's not quite, at least for me, as personal. But then you have something like Talk to a Friend, even parts of Heavier, something like Clean Again and Secrets, Like I Do, that this band manages to take so many personal notes and incorporate them into a post-hardcore song that fuses so well with Matt's pop sensibility and creates a cohesive album that feels less like a comeback album of sorts and more like a statement. It's not a, hey guys, we're back from losing Johnny. It's a, hey guys, we're back from losing Johnny. This is how we're going to be moving forward. Look how much better off we are without him. Because I love the Johnny material, but I think that this runs circles around a lot of their older material and their older songs. And even with the rebrand and everything that they do in 2021, because they said they've got new music coming by then, that A, I'm excited to hear this live when they inevitably tour, and B, to see with how good this is, that they're only going to continue refining their sound from here. That I'm just incredibly excited to see where this band goes moving forward. And again, this album is way too good to put anywhere besides my number 2.
Yep.
Jacob?
I wholeheartedly agree. My number 2 album is Slaves to Better Days.
I had a dream that I was drowning everyone I've ever loved. I'm feeling heavier despite
So I'm going to assume then that 2 people here have the same number 1.
No.
Yes.
Yes,
I would think so.
I
No.
think so.
I think so too. If it's not, then I have absolutely no
Yeah.
clue what Jacob's number 1 is. I'm completely lost. He could pull out Changes by Justin Bieber and it would blow my mind. Enough about that. Tell me why you like To Better Days so much.
So, first we go back to movements, well, not really. This song is about a breakup again,
Mm-hmm.
and I think comparing this to movements, I like the sound better. The emotion is still there, but it's not as prevalent as in movements. But I think I like. Well, I do. I know I like this better, and I find myself relating to like almost every song. Like you said, you relate to parts of Talk to a Friend and Heavier. Not only being able to relate like things that I've done, but like things that have been done to me as well. And I'm gonna read some lyrics from. I don't even know what song this is. I'm blanking right now. You guys can tell me because I have the lyrics written here.
Okay, hit me with it.
I take the blame. I want to change. But that's Heavier. Okay.
It's heavier. Yeah.
Yeah. I take
You
the
start,
blame. I want
you
to
start
change.
singing it and you know.
Yeah. I take the blame. I want to change, but I can't settle the score. And there's been times like instead of trying to solve an issue, I'd be like trying to get even with someone instead. Like I don't know. And I relate to that so hard. There's times in like I've been listening to Heavier and Talk to a Friend and what's another good single?
Eye Opener.
Eye Opener, yes. Like since they came out, and I never really listened to the lyrics until after my breakup. Well, I did listen to the lyrics, but I
Didn't feel them.
I didn't listen to them.
Yeah. Exactly.
I guess experience is the best teacher, is all I can say. Another song I bonded with a lot was Wasting My Youth, which is actually about like bottling up your feelings, not communicating. And that's something I struggle with. I'll read lyrics from that as well. I don't let go because I don't know. Who would I be without this pain? And it means a lot to me. Like this experience, I'm gonna call it, has shaped me, and I know what I've done wrong, and I know what I can do better in the future. And I guess all I can say is to better days.
True.
No, I think you've covered. I guess I forgot to mention "Wasting My Youth," which has quickly grown on me as one of my favorite songs from this album. So I'm glad that you've got an appreciation for it as well.
So does that take it to me?
Our number 1 albums of the year.
Drum rolls.
For my number 1 album of the year, to absolutely nobody's surprise, it's Eggy Pocket by... No, I'm just kidding.
No!
It's To Better Days by Slaves. I feel like it was obvious at this point. I'm surprised I'm the only one that had it as my number 1. I'm a little surprised by that, in all honesty. But my reasoning for putting this at number 1 and not Amaranth, I can sum it up in 2 ways. First, when I compare my 3 favorite songs from Manifest and stack them up side by side to my 3 favorite songs from Heavier, it's Talk to a Friend, Eye Opener, and Burial Eye. And then I compare that to Archangel, Boom, and Viral. And by number 3, Sway starts to take an edge. And the further I go down that list of comparing songs one for one, the more Sway's edges away one by one. And I knew that no matter how many more times I've listened to Amaranth, I have listened to Amaranth significantly more than this Slaves album, in all honesty. But no matter how many times I compare the numbers, I can't justify putting this not at my number 1. And the second reason that I can put this as my number 1, outside of just the raw numbers, this album defined my 2020. This album is, like, I am going to think back to this album more so than any other album in 2020. I mean, I know I mentioned with Future Palace that, like, that's left more of a lasting impact on me. But I feel like if we're looking in the grand scheme of things, To Better Days is the album of 2020. Future Palace Escape is, like, my personal anthem of 2020, maybe. But everything about To Better Days is relevant. It's close to home. It is perfectly executed. It is top to bottom just an amazing album, and I don't want to spend too much more time talking about it because this is just the third time in a row that we are talking about To Better Days at this point. But yeah, it's my number 1 album of 2020. I think the last thing I want to mention, I don't think we've given enough love to Witch Hunt yet, for being my favorite of the non-singles. Super catchy. Otherwise, we've talked to a friend. We've talked to death about Eye Opener. Burial Eye is a song that I think personally I'm a lot higher on than you guys, but
it's grown on me a lot.
It's just an incredible album. I don't think there's too much more to say. That 2 of us have it as our number 2, and I have it as my number 1.
And then there's
like,
the placement that shall not be named.
Yeah.
The forgotten one, the one that we won't mention. Anyway.
Story of my life.
Anyway.
Now we go to Sweden with Love, for Justin here, right?
Yeah, we definitely go to Sweden. This album was released in...
we don't need the backstory, we already know what it is.
Yeah, it's it's Solence's album Direction from Sweden, everyone! No, please. It's Noya's Through the Fire, All Things Are Renewed.
Solence was an EP anyway, you fuck.
It was an album! What are you talking about?
Guys, we almost went an episode without mentioning.
That's the point.
And then
New Year's resolution. We can do it.
I would have not said anything if Derek didn't say sweet. I was like, I gotta catch him off guard with that.
Doomed.
I mean, that's my fault for saying Aggie Pocket and
Yeah. No, guys, it's Noya's fucking Through Fire, All Things Are Renewed. What a beautiful album. This came out of nowhere for me. I've been listening to these guys since their debut album, Colorblind. And while I only really liked 1 to 2 songs from that album, man, this album blew me away with the emotion, just the amount of care and time they put into this. They put in May, they said they finished recording the album, and then they started releasing singles like a couple of weeks later, and it was just really good single after really good single, Crawl Into My Skin, Broken Glass, into Bleak, into Runaway. Like there's I think Broken Glass is probably the only one that I really didn't jive with. And then here comes this album with a beautiful 4 minutes of just talking on a soapbox of just talking about the troubles and the anxiety of everything that's been going on, and trying to fight through it to get get to your end goal, get to what you're trying to end up at. And then there's songs on here. Save Myself is probably the one I find lyrically one of the best. And that is mainly due to the chorus of, I can't believe I walked into your fire. Your love made me feel like someone else before you I didn't dare to aspire. You dragged me from the depths, and you pulled me from the wreck that was my soul. I think that line in general kind of just encompasses a lot of my general anxieties of having to rely on other people back a couple of years ago, trying to pick myself up. And if it wasn't for my friends, or if it wasn't for the people that I cared about, I wouldn't be the person who I am today. And I think that lyric in general kind of speaks to me. And I could go on and on about several different lyrics. This entire album is crafted beautifully. Like, Nick, the vocalist, did such a good job. That's not even talking about the surprising amount of screams that were in this album, all coming from the one, like the first 3 actual songs: Crawl to My Skin, Meaning to Your Pain, and Bleak, Meaning to Your Pain. Probably my favorite of the album, Bleak, being one of my favorite features this year, with just instrumentally that kind of melodic sound, and then going into this short but very emotional like heavy like scream from the from the feature. And while I'm not into that band, he fit really well on this, and he helped produce the album, and they all just did a really good job. There's a lot of notable songs here I could go on and on about talking about, but I will say the ones that have stayed on my playlist the longest have been Meaning to Your Pain, Trace, parentheses, Empty Me, parentheses, Aching, and Rebirth.
So I think that wraps it up with your thoughts on Noya? Or...
Well, yeah, I was wondering to see if anyone else had any comments.
I don't have too much to add, personally.
What I was going to say is, would it be a fair assumption to allow Jacob to say his next to stay on topic, or am I off base? Okay.
I want to go last.
Okay, then I'll go next if you're done, Justin.
Yeah, I'm done.
I think before we do, the only thing I would add on to that is that Meaning to Your Pain is also my favorite song on this album. I'm not nearly as high on it, but I do want to at least mention that Meaning to Your Pain is fantastic. So, yeah.
My favorite is Bleak, personally, but yeah, great album.
Bleak's also really good.
So I guess to absolutely nobody's surprise here, my album of the year is Afterburner by Dance Gavin Dance. When they announced the new album, I knew before I even heard it that it was going to take my album of the year. And it was kind of up to every other release after it to try and compete, like no matter what was anticipated. When this hit, I'm like, no, this is number one. Everything else has to live up to this. Ultimately, I loved To Better Days. And I thought that Movements was the better, or had the better album rather, in terms of connecting with me on a personal level and making me feel how good music should make you feel. But neither album for me had the same staying power or time repeated as Afterburner did. I own 6 copies of this album on vinyl, unashamedly. Between vinyl and Spotify, I think I've listened to it around, like front to back, around 70 or 80 times at this point, not counting any individual listens of songs and playlists. This album served the same purpose as Peach Club by Emarosa did for me last year, in the sense that no matter what I was doing at the time, there was like a 5-month period after it came out where at any given moment, if I was just chilling in my bed, or if I was playing video games, or if I was doing stuff around the house as far as like cleaning goes, that I would just press play on the album and let it run. And I did that a decent amount with To Better Days, but not nearly as much as I did for Afterburner, which is part of why I have it at my number one. Jacob mentioned it earlier, but I had it written that this album is Dance Gavin Dance's experimental nature at its finest. That it feels like with every album, they try generally at least on 1 or 2 songs to push boundaries forward from where they were before. And that feels like the case on not only 1 or 2 songs on this album, but for a lot of the album as a whole. Rather than the same old Dance Gavin Dance I know and love rehashed onto different tracks. Calentamiento Global is my least favorite song on this album, and still
perfect.
Yo, it's because I have it as my album of the year. I gotta have it down. I still have that song as like an 8 on 10, despite it being my least favorite song in the album. And I mentioned with To Better Days how I couldn't skip any songs on that album. And I have one that I don't revisit when I listen to this album, and that's this song for me. But it's the peak of experimentation on here with Tillian singing in Spanish on it, and the instrumentals in that song as well having a lot of Latin influence. Songs like Say Hi, which is tied for my favorite song with Three Wishes. It feels like it's less DGD and more of like Secret Band featuring Tillian. We talked about Andrew Wells getting half a song on Nothing Shameful and how beautiful it is. Bill Murray being the first official feature since Chino Moreno of Deftones on their 2008 album. Getting featured both vocally and instrumentally, I thought was interesting. You don't usually see a lot of features on songs where they get an instrumental and vocal feature at the same time.
Oh,
yeah, hit me with it.
I forget what song it is, but one of the singles has the Veil Maya guitars feature.
That's Lyric Sly, Marco Kubo. Yeah. Prisoner, the lead single, has a breakdown at the end that's kind of a break in form since Awkward from Instant Gratification in 2015. You mentioned Marco Kubo, guitarist for Veil Maya in Lyric Sly, as well as background features from Andrew Wells on vocals and Tillian using harsh screams in the bridge of Lyric Sly. I mentioned before that you were reading my notes. I had it written down on here that this album was a lot of fun, which you also mentioned. It wasn't as like blatantly fun as Pink Elephant by Stan Atlantic, but it was still one that I enjoyed a lot. I would describe it as a great time to listen to. The variation in different styles across songs makes the album like fly by in a way that feels entertaining, and that it's not quite as long as its runtime actually is. But despite all that experimentation, it's still built on that basic foundation of what makes Dance Gavin Dance, Dance Gavin Dance. And it makes it feel like only a DGD record could. Jake, you mentioned that To Better Days was the album that defined your 2020. For me, this was the album that defined my 2020, because in a year where so many things went wrong and everything went to shit, for lack of a better term, this was my comfort album. And this was the one that, like I said, I found myself revisiting the most, and that not necessarily meant the most to me, but was there for me the most. Whereas Movements wasn't there for me. It was a way to express maybe feelings or bring them to the forefront in a way that would be like healthy and therapeutic, like you'd mentioned, Jake. This was something that I could go to escape, to when things were going south, when anything bad was happening in the world, that I knew I could press play on this album and have it be there for me in a way that would allow me to, just for the, I believe it's like 47, 48, 49 minute runtime, escape everything that was going on around me and just listen to music that made me happy. And that's ultimately why I had to give it my number one position over everything else.
Yeah, I know how much this band means to you, so not surprising at all.
Yeah, top 0.05% of listeners this year.
Shout out Spotify Wrapped.
Yes, sir.
I think the only thing I want to add to this is that Dance Gavin Dance went from a band that I only liked one song to me enjoying 4 or 5 songs from this album. So, that's probably disappointing for you to hear, but it's significantly better than me liking almost nothing off of anything else I've ever heard
means
from them.
you like 4 or 5 times more Dance Gavin Dance songs than you did before.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a ratio I can get by.
I went from only enjoying Headhunter to enjoying almost all of the singles, plus like 2 songs from the album songs.
Hell yeah.
I also think this is a band you need to see live first.
Yes, absolutely. Speaking of, they have a live performance that went on at 8 p.m. that I am going to watch immediately after we finish this. So
it's not the same.
Soon. Hopefully soon. Jacob, you are the last person.
That takes us,
to give your number one album of the year. Last, but certainly not least.
Mm-hmm.
My number one album of the year is Noia. Through Fire All Things Are Renewed.
Sometimes I had to let the rain
I knew it.
Yeah, I made it pretty obvious it's going to be my number one, and I think it's because I compare it a lot to Imminence's Turned Light On, and because it covers the same topics, has similar
Right.
sound. Both bands are from Sweden.
Sweden is just a gold mine, bro.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Them in Australia.
Yeah. But yeah, I know this topic is very overdone, especially in this genre. And this band knows how to make you feel. But unlike Imminence, I would say it's more of a positive ending in this album. Because in Through Fire, which is the intro, you get to hear about people who are struggling with mental illness, depression, all that, and then in All Things Are Renewed, you get solutions, or not necessarily solutions, but what's the word?
Resolutions?
Resolutions, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't.
I get what you're trying to say, though, that there's sort of like this issue posed at the start and people's experiences of how negative it was. And then at the end, you get that juxtaposition of, I overcame that.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
But something I wanted to share, or is it necessarily a lyric? I don't know. Is it called a lyric when it's just spoken word? Or either way, I'm just going to read from Through Fire. The opposite of depression is not happiness, but vitality. I think it's depression basically sucks the life out of you, making you seem dull, lifeless. And I think when you're depressed, you're searching for happiness, but happiness isn't really happiness is a state. It's not permanent. And I think vitality is such a much better word for people who are depressed to search. It describes it better, is what I'm saying. And then I want to ask the band this on Twitter, but in the end of All Things Are Renewed, there's 40 seconds of silence, and I'm wondering I'm guessing that this is a time for self-reflection. And I should ask the band on Twitter. They probably answer.
That was my thought too with that last 40 seconds. So I'm glad you and I are on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, 2020 has been really, really tough for me, especially towards the end of the year. So this album came out before all that, but it was there for me. And I just wanted to talk about some tracks that I like. So, Crawl Into My Skin is about wanting people to understand what you're going through without explicitly telling them, hoping they notice something is going on. And I got lyrics from it. So tell me why I can't get out of here, and tell me how I learned to love myself. Bleak has a very nihilistic atmosphere, and the world is very dull. Well, as a depressed person, they see the world as very dull and bleak. A depressed person would say, or would see, everybody who looks happy, they can't be, because the world is such a shitty place, and it's very nihilistic, is basically what I...
Yeah.
You look at the news, you see everything is miserable, and I found a Twitter extension for that removes trending, and it's the best thing ever, dude.
Can you send me that? Because I've been having that issue for 6 months now.
I will.
Dope.
Yeah. Broken Glass, my favorite single, I'd say, is essentially challenging people who say it gets better. And I'll read the lyrics. I've heard they say it gets better. I hope they're right. It's basically challenging. Well, I said that already. It's like, if broken glass can't heal itself, why can't, or I can't either. You need to face your problems head on. And definitely not bleh. Last but not least, favorite song off the album is Rain. And Rain is about a relationship crumbling because of someone struggling with mental illness, at least how I interpret it. And I think I completely relate. And accepting the past and dealing with the negative emotions that come with a breakup, letting the rain fall, as it said in the song. The only way out is through all the negative emotions, through all the negative thoughts, dealing with them, not letting them build up. And on top of that, there's fucking violins.
The violins, they always come back.
This album it's done amazing things for me. It's been there. This is my fire, and through fire, all things are renewed.
I think that's a nice bow tie on this top 10 albums episode, unless there's anything else anyone wants to add. I had a blast doing this. I hope you guys did as well.
Of course.
Absolutely.
So I think that just about wraps it up. One last show on social media, at Hivemind Radio _ on Instagram and Twitter. Go follow. So that's going to do it for the Hivemind Radio recap podcast for 2020. This is it. This is the final recap we are doing on what an insane year this was. Whether you listen to this in 2021 or you are here for the ride already as this comes out, thank you. We appreciate you once again. And that's what I'm going to leave it at. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next year.